Do do do, theme song. Do do do, I'm broke so this is my theme song. Do do do, just imagine this is an awesome theme song. Do do, theme song. Left of the box. Hello, welcome to Left of the Box. Bonjour, bienvenue. I'm Sandy. Welcome, everyone. I wasn't necessarily thinking I was going to do a live stream today because the last time I did a live stream, I was totally forgetting that the leaders debates were coming up. So I'm like, I should probably cover it. Me and like all the other Canadian content creators are also covering it. But my draw that I have is that I'm going to be joined by two Americans. Yeah, get the Americans' point of view on this because, we need to know that. Well, we give our point of view on what's happening down there all the time. So why not? So far in the sandbox, we have Anti-Case Tarot and Looney Tunes 9000. Welcome. Oh, and there's Jet. And, yeah. Anti-Case Tarot is wondering why has CBC been sitting outside for all their newscasting today? Is the debate outside? Couldn't they just green screen the outside but sit inside? You see, I think what it is in this neck of the woods here, it's springtime, and whenever it's a gorgeous day like this, they try to find any excuse possible to go sit outside. To go spend some time outside. I think that's all it is. It's just, it's such a beautiful day today that they're like, we could do this inside, but outside. Much better. So in just a little while, I will be joined by Dan and Bam. They're over on the West Coast, and they're a few hours behind. And they also have to prep because right after my show is Dan's Power Report show. So it's a double hitter for him, and it's going to be a super long night. So they will be joining me in just a little bit, and probably not even until after the debate kind of starts. And so you're just stuck with me until then. Although I keep on getting distracted because I have the preset ready to go, and it's on CTV News, and there's like commercials and stuff, and I see the movement, and I think somebody has joined me, and I'm all ready to be like, somebody has joined me, but not yet. So Looney Tunes 9000 says, I'm modding you and Lance at the same time, Sandy. Yeah, I figured he'd be doing this as well. Also Rachel Gilmore, also Steve Boots, also I saw, there was a, was on my phone. I just saw it a moment ago. It is, oh darn it, lost it. One of the news press progress. Yeah, I think they're covering it too. Plus like the mainstream news media networks, but this will be more entertaining. I hope you're feeling better soon, Jet. Oh, David Dole is also covering it. Yeah, makes sense. And Rachel's on Twitch. Yeah, I think I saw her mentioning that she's on Twitch only, which might help her. I think Lance will simulcast. Is that how you say it? Between YouTube and Twitch as well. So, yeah. So, it is, it's getting close to crunch time. I have arranged for Mark Joycey to join me on election night to cover the results live, and he's on the East Coast. So who knows how long he'll last, but he should be able to last long enough to get through the results in Quebec and Ontario, and by then we'll probably have a pretty good idea as to if Mark Carney is going to sweep it like a lot of the polls are saying he's going to do. Because apparently he's doing really well in Quebec, and if you do really well in Quebec and really well in Ontario, then it's kind of done. But I don't listen to the polls because I don't care about the polls because the stupid algorithms, they're driving me crazy. They're driving me crazy because we only see things that kind of, oh, what's that term? When it reinforces your biases, but I think there's another term for that. Um, there's another term for it, but it is basically saying reinforces your biases. And since the algorithms are all arranged like that, we're not seeing the other side. We're not seeing, maybe different sets of polls or different commentary or other people talking big about Pierre Poilievre. As I say, going into these elections, just vote with the assumption that there is no safe riding and that every riding is flippable. That's it. Just because I'm not going to bother trying to predict who's going to win. What's the point? Because again, there's just so many variables that you just don't know. Are the polls taking account for this and first past the post and all this sort of stuff? And it really is up in the air because it does really boil down to, it's not just a matter of popular votes, it's a matter of the spread of the votes because of first past the post. So, do enough different ridings have enough higher votes first past the post in order to push them past the post? And so it is hard to say because lots of governments have gotten into power and majority positions before with not winning the popular vote. So it is always a little bit tricky. Anti-Case Tarot, it's nice. I took walks, but then inside to warm up. I'm still hoping to go for a walk. I've been sitting in front of the computer all day working on some other stuff, which I'm super anxious about, and my brain is just completely scattered. So I'm probably going to mess up this setup from time to time. So just bear with me when you see the behind the scenes as I'm trying to switch the scenes and all that sort of stuff when new people come on and the audio isn't working and all that sort of fun stuff. Because yeah, there's that other secret book I keep on talking about that I can't share with you guys, and I feel like such an ass every time I talk about it. But it's hard for me to not talk about it. For one, I'm autistic, and that's just kind of what we do. Also, it's a big thing in my life. This book has been 10 years in the making. And I kind of have a deadline for it, an event that I'm going to in early May that's the type of group of people that can know that I wrote it. And I want to have copies there available for me to give to them. And all I'm waiting on right now is the cover. And I had somebody originally last year design a cover, but not like polish it off, finish it. It was just kind of like, here's my idea. And I really like it. And I really, really like it. And I got back in touch with her recently. And there were a couple of emails back and forth, so she knows, but then I haven't heard from her since the 8th. And I'm getting worried because I kind of need the cover in the next day or two. Because, yeah. But speaking of books, one that I can share with you guys, please feel free to buy this book. Well, I guess it wouldn't be free. Please feel excited to buy this book. Yeah. I was on the Letter Hack last Friday as a character from the book, which was super fun because I got to go on as a vampire and do role play as a vampire. And any excuse I have to dress up as a vampire, I'm so there. And I need to bug him actually to see if maybe I could go on Left Past 10 as that character, join them as a vampire. That would be super fun. But let's see who else is in here. I think I saw somebody else pop into the sandbox. Danny, hello. Yeah. Also, you can now become a member. Yeah, I've done the whole you can join my channel thing. I got the issue sorted out with my other patron. It wasn't Patreon that was the problem, apparently. It was PayPal rejected it for reasons. I retook it out. So it bounced back into my Patreon account. So I was able to pull it back out. So that's all fine now. But it's good to maybe have a couple sources of revenue. And I see that a lot of people who are regular on YouTube channels, I think they just like the convenience of not having to go to another platform to support content creators they like. Because I know the Letter Hack has a ton of members on his channel. And so there's feldspar, granite, and quartz, which are all parts of sand. Because it's the sandbox. And I was trying to think of like cute little things because it's just if you say a lot of things out of context, then you don't necessarily know how they're connected unless you're playing a really advanced game. Because I could have done like castle, dune, stone. Because you have sand castles, there are sand dunes and sandstones. But Danny says, you look amazing in that interview. You also did some amazing stuff with your hair. The white streak actually looked really good on you. You know what that was? You know what that was? That was baby powder. I just was shaking the baby powder on. That's all it was. Because one might wonder, why do I have a little bit of baby powder here? It's because I got some plushie toys, and the place that I got them, they said in order to keep them soft, you actually sprinkle baby powder all over them. So that it doesn't absorb so much of the like grease from your fingers and stuff. Because there was, in particular, there was this plushie of a goat that I got my grandmother when she was in the nursing home because she really, really loved goats. And she carried this goat around with her everywhere after that. So yeah, so I just dumped a whole bunch of baby powder on my hair. It's not like I'm going to use it for anything else. Oh. Yeah. It's an old trick that I learned from high school theater. Because I was thinking, like, how else do I do that? Like, I have a blonde wig, and, like, technically speaking, Minuet is more of a blonde than she is my color of hair. But, eh, you know, I can only do so much. I don't want to invest because, like, I wanted to stay on longer. I know the Letter Hack, he had certain like time frames in mind and other things I wanted to cover, so I totally get that. It's just normally I like to spend at least as much time on screen as it took me to do the makeup. And so it was roughly like I was on for a half hour, and roughly that's how long it took me to do the makeup, so it's fair. But, you know, when you get all dressed up like that, you kind of want to stay out like I want to play that role a bit longer. So that's why I think it'd be fun to do like a left past 10 with it. But let's see. Oh yeah. So we still have 14 minutes, 15 minutes until the debate starts. I heard a little bit about the French debate. I haven't watched it. I'll admit it. Why? I don't want to watch two debates 2 nights in a row from the political leaders when they're probably going to go over a lot of the same stuff anyway. I know they try to vary it up and whatnot, but it is what it is. And I did hear that Jagmeet held Mark Carney's feet to the fire with actually saying to him, like, why aren't you calling what's happening in Gaza a genocide? And apparently Mark Carney just kind of, didn't really answer or deflected or something. And he's still not wanting to use the word genocide. And it's like, you know what, at this point you might as well, because Netanyahu already called you out for accidentally saying it. You might as well just, Netanyahu's never going to like you unless you go full out, like join them in the genocide, like actively sending troops over. He's never going to think you're doing enough unless you do that. So just call it what it is. You know, when you have all these different human rights organizations calling it a genocide, it's a genocide. And quite honestly, you don't even have to wait that long. Like, I understand why Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, they have to like do a certain level of investigation and stuff because they have a certain level of credibility, and they have like a lot of different criterias that they need to investigate and actually make sure and all that sort of stuff before they can actually declare something like that a genocide. So they can't just, even though it's like it's obvious to everyone, it's the same like you know, you see somebody shoot somebody, it's like, that's obviously murder, but you still have to go through the court process. So it can take a while. And so I think that's why it took them so long to get on board with it, is just because of the process that they have to go through. But I think most people in October of when this started knew where it was going. And so, uh, let's see. Anti-Case Terra valid on the makeup and dressing up. Yeah. Vlad on the makeup and dressing up. Yeah, yeah. It's also like if I'm traveling, uh, like I don't live too far from Toronto, but I'm not going to travel to Toronto for a half-hour trip, you know, to be there. So when it comes to traveling, I at least want to be there for the length of time I'd be in the car traveling there and back. So if I go to Toronto, I at a minimum, I'm there for 2.5 hours, depending on traffic. um, Although once I'm in Toronto, I usually like to stay there even longer. I lived there briefly, and it's one of the things I get a lot of like nostalgia when I go there. But it's still this feeling of it's a nice place to visit, but I don't think I'd want to live here. It's too expensive for one thing. But it was super interesting how you could just wander into a different part of that city, and it's like you've gone into a different country because of the way the clustering of all the cultural centers were and things of that sort. And there's always new things to discover, and you know, little fruit markets where you could get mangoes as you're walking by and stuff. Like it was really, really neat, and I really, really liked it. And then, you know, pretty much every weekend there's some sort of festival or event going on, and quite often you don't know about them until you stumble into them. And so I really do love Toronto for the multiculturalism that they have there, and you know how curious a lot of the people were when I went there, because it was quite often like, uh, hi, what's your name? Where are you from? And I know in other areas, people kind of get a little irksome when they're asking where you're from. But in Toronto, it really was, it's so multicultural. Everyone's just curious about everyone else. And, um, you know, I couldn't get away with just saying, you know, from a different part of Ontario. I had to like, here's my heritage, as far as I know. Because they were super curious. And my last name is Hungarian, but the issue was as soon as I said that, then they would think I knew something about Hungary, and it's like, I know nothing, nothing, nothing. And they're like, well, about baklava. I'm like, that disgusting dessert? Yeah, no, no. Oh, we got Hunger Games 1989. I'm doing okay, Hunger Games. Just, like I said, a little stressed about this other project that I need to get done. I need to get it done. I need it done. But I still have images and social media stuff to work on for it. Oh, but I do have an event in early May that I can take this particular book to that I would really like to. So I'm just crossing my fingers that the cover artist can get back to me. It's like I'm so tempted to like throw it up on screen, like here's the covers. It's just I can't. And again, it's one of those things, I feel like an ass every time I talk about it, but it's just it is such a important thing in my life. But I think if anyone were to stumble across it and realize that it was me who wrote this book, you'd completely understand why I kind of need to keep myself separate from there. NDK's Tarot says, I lived there as a kid, Toronto. I think most Canadians have to spend some time living in Toronto. Or most people in Canada. It's one of those things. Most people I know have spent, like, if they haven't lived directly in Toronto, a partner of theirs has. It's like 1 degree of separation. Everyone in Toronto or everyone in Canada knows somebody who has lived in Toronto, like 1 degree separation worth. But I did like it when I was there, but I don't think I would ever want to move back. Because the other issue is just there's always that ambient noise. Always, always, always. And it's nice when it can actually get quiet. I like quiet. Although some people might think the ambient noise is soothing, but then there's a lot of unsoothing ambient noise depending on where you're living. And considering that one of the years that I lived there was in a shelter system, the very different ambient noise that I was getting at that time. Because I was there for 3 years, 2 in an apartment and 1 year in a shelter system. Oh, and then I had to move back down here with a boyfriend I found in the shelter system, which was a mistake. And I've actually had people say this to me, and without catching on what they were saying, because when I mentioned that that guy was a bit of an asshole, they're like, well, we expect he was in the shelter. Like, you mean like me? The same shelter as me, so yeah. Uh-huh. They don't quite pick up sometimes on what you're saying. And then their question I would get was like, don't you have family? Well, yeah, a lot of people in the shelter system do. They were picking the least worst option. You're there because the options to staying with family is just not really an option. Hunger Games 1989. That's like if you are Norwegian, you're supposed to like the nasty fish, fisk. Anti-Gaze Tarot. I would, if I could afford to, I still go there for Indigenous community, which Teen 9 has many of. I can imagine. And, oh, yeah, I guess the debate is starting. It's supposed to start at 7. Must be a lot of preamble. So why don't I switch over screens? Thank you, Looney Tunes, for being one of my producers. So I guess I would do this, and then I have to do this, and then I can do this. Oh, no, this order, sorry. Like I said, this is going to be a really stumbly around night while I try to figure all this out. There we go, that. And then I can remove Frodo from the screen. Boom. There we go. I'm out of frame. I hate that. See, it says debate at 7. What are they saying?
Corey, and sort of what the strategy.
Like, oh, that is quiet.
Thinking I'm the front runner, so that's going to be the
case. I would be taking no risks if I were Mark Carney tonight. Yeah. And and insofar as you have anything bad to say about anybody, I'd say it about Donald Trump.
It's super annoying me.
I just think you just let it all bounce off you. You try to look prime ministerial. You try to let the more the dogs are barking at you, the more you just look straight at the camera and try to maintain your cool.
Okay. And is the converse true for everybody else?
So they're just looking at their notes.
It may well be, and I'll go back to.
So right now they're just looking at their notes. I wish, yeah. Yeah, and I also heard that in the French debate, they allowed True North and Rebel media to ask questions like they were legit media sources, and yet the Green Party couldn't have a candidate stand in. Like, it's just, are you kidding me? And I was talking a bit about this last time in my last live stream, how it can be tricky because Mark Carney snapped at the Globe and Mail, but the Globe and Mail is a known mainstream news network. But I also saw Global News support a Griff, I don't know what she is, somebody who is very problematic in the media sphere, the content creating sphere. She calls herself a journalist, but she's been known to harass and do really nasty things to people, both her and the people around her. And they were trying to say, why aren't you treating her like a real media source? Probably because she's not. So it gets so tricky because you don't really want the politicians snapping at news media outlets, but how do you know who's who these days? Like, what's a legitimate media source versus another one? So it is very, very tricky as to, who do you take seriously these days? Like, fact checking is so difficult. And I try to fact check my information. Like, I try to go from reputable news sources, but sometimes reputable news sources mess up as well, which is just problematic. Let's see. What is other people's favorite cultural food, since we're on that topic and I haven't eaten, so I'm going to start it with talking about food, which always bugs me when other people do it. Because I think my favorite cultural food is just the poutine. I love, but it has to be a good poutine, because there is such a thing as bad poutine. And I've had plenty of bad poutine. Oddly enough, one of the better places for poutine is New York Fries. Figures. But there was this one pub that I went to. I think it was called the Fat Duck Pub. And they had the most amazing poutines. Like their French fries were like thicker, and like they were square, rectangular, and thicker than a hot dog. But they were cooked perfectly through. And then it was just dripping. And so they would kind of lattice them up a bit and then cover it all with gravy and cheese. And oh my God, that one was so good. So, you know, bad poutines exist. I've had plenty of them. And then also I like having brisket on poutine or pulled pork on poutine. Yeah. And that's the stuff for me. Let's see. Andy K's Tarot on foods and culture. I'm indigenous. I'm allergic to maple. I can see why. Hello, Carrie Woods. Hello, Sandy. Been a while. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. Grand Theft Autobot. My pain was 100 out of 10 today, so I got a little stoned. I'm groggy and gonna lurk mostly. Well, I hope you're feeling better soon. Danny, for something delicious from Norway, I like... Oh, you spelt it out phonetically. Crumb ka... Kranzy ka? I'm probably butchering it still. Jet, oh my God, the camera movement is actually causing some motion sickness. Am I moving the camera? Am I like shaking too much or something? Or is it them? Grand Theft Autobot, thicker than steak fries? Oh, a lot thicker than those. Let's see. Hello, Autumn Leaves. MB Cat, welcome, welcome. I now have the ability to have members join my YouTube channel. Nadia was the first one. She was the first one. And I'm still very conflicted. They're not actually covering the news or the debate yet. Oh, well, it's going to start in like a minute. I'm conflicted as to if I have separate material for members, and I'm conflicted as in I already know what my answer is, and I know it's not going to be popular because members like perks. They do. But I'm part of a lot of online YouTube communities, and quite often I feel excluded because of poverty, because I can't afford to be a member. I can't afford being part of their conversations and stuff. And I don't want to exclude people in my community for not having enough money to be a member. So I will do members streams that are supported by members, but it would be for everyone. Because that's just the way I roll with that one. I'll see if there's a way of giving out like free memberships to people, because I know like the Majority Report does that, and I would like to be able to do that as well. Okay, they're actually starting the debate.
On theme, stay
Let me
on
know.
time.
Give me a thumbs up if it's okay.
Each leader speaks will be counted on these clocks,
for sound
visible to the leaders and to you at home. This is the 2025 Federal Leaders Debate.
Hello, Philip Blair. We are raiding from Bad Haspera.
Well, welcome, leaders. Good to be with you here tonight in Montreal for what I'm sure will be a memorable evening. Our first theme is tariffs and threats to Canada, and we will begin with a round of questions. You will each have a minute to answer, and then we'll go to open debate, and the first question goes to Mr. Carney. Okay, what is the starting point for negotiations, Mr. Carney, with the United States if, as you have stated, our relationship with the U.S. is over as we know it?
Well, first, Steve, may I thank you and also thank fellow leaders
Also,
for
Dan
their
and
service
Bam
to Canada.
will be joining me in a
people at
little
home
bit.
for taking
They're
the time
running
to
behind
watch.
because they're on the
I
East
just want to
Coast,
underscore
and they're
the
also
premise to your
prepping
question
for,
because
or
I
they're
think
on the
the
West Coast and also
relationship that
prepping
we've
for
had with
their
the
show
United States,
right after
relationship over
mine.
the course of almost the last 4 decades, which has been one of steady and increasing integration, has fundamentally changed because the president is looking to fundamentally restructure the trading system. So the starting point has to be one of strength. It has to show that we have control of our own economic destiny, has to have a clear plan here at home to build this economy, to diversify our trading partners with like-minded countries, and also has to have a position of strength in terms of our reaction to the U.S. unjustified tariffs. And that's why we have put in place counter tariffs that have maximum impact in the United States and minimum impact here at home.
So first question
Mr. Poilievre,
is
would
about
you do anything
banking. It
differently?
goes to a banker.
Well, first of all, thank you, Steve, and thank you to our fellow contestants here today. It's an honor to be here.
Contestants.
What would I do different?
This isn't a game show.
I'll start by what I would do the same. I think we do need to counter the American tariffs with our own to deter this economic aggression. We must make clear that we will always be sovereign and independent. What would I be doing differently?
You see, this is
Well,
just wild to me.
We need to be in a position
that
of strength.
conservatives and
The
liberals
Liberal
are on board
government
with the
has
same
weakened
thing.
our economy with anti-energy laws,
Because that's
red
how
tape,
toxic
and
it
high
is
taxes that have
to
driven
be
$500
supporting
billion
Trump right now.
out of our country into the United States and made us
'Cause you
incapable
know
of
he
shipping
doesn't
our
want to agree with
resources
them
overseas.
about having tariffs.
That weakness threatens our ability to stand up for ourselves. So what would I do? I would cut taxes, red tape, and approve our resource projects so that we can get our goods to market and bring home the jobs so we stand up to President Trump from a position of strength.
Mr. Singh, you get the next question. Can we trust the United States to work with us on matters such as Arctic sovereignty and defense
they
policy?
have a little clock thing in the
I
background
think we've
for how much
seen,
people are talking.
first of all, good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in, and thanks for the question, Steve. We've seen what, for a lot of people, feels like a betrayal when we look at the United States. I grew up in a border town. I grew up in Windsor, and we saw how connected we were as a city and as a community. People lived on one side of the border, worked on the other. People traveled back and forth all the time. We're in the automotive capital of Canada, and we knew how important it was to be able to build cars in Canada, but we saw that those cars went back and forth across the border. Seeing what Donald Trump did to attack Canada in this unprovoked way without any justification really felt like a betrayal. And so Canadians now are right to say, well, we don't really trust Donald Trump at this point, and we can't really have a lot of faith in him. So when it comes to our Arctic sovereignty and our security, we need to make decisions that are in our best interest and no longer be so dependent and so reliant on the U.S. And that's what I would advocate for, making sure we are resilient, independent, and less dependent on the United States.
So
Mr.
if we're less
Blanchet, for you,
dependent on
what
the United
supports
States, who are we going
would
to
you
be more
want to see
dependent on,
for
at least?
industries affected by tariffs,
Take one
many, of
step
course, of
further
which
with
are in
that,
Quebec?
Jeremy.
Many of them. First, be all welcome in Quebec and Montreal. You have me because I try not to speak English in Montreal. However, I think we should never underestimate the threat that Mr. Trump poses on
Do I like him
Quebec
as a
economy
person?
and Canada
Yves
economy and
Blanchet?
Mexico
Not
economy.
really. His
But we
voice?
must acknowledge
cool
the
to me.
fact that the economy of Quebec is built differently. The challenges are not the same. The necessity for Quebec to have at least partly its own voice in the negotiation is important. The difference between Quebec and Canada is very important in terms of economy, but also in terms of identity and language and values and who we are and the way we want to handle immigration. So we have the right to be different, and if this difference is being respected by whoever becomes Prime Minister of Canada, we will be reliable partners in order to achieve the best possible negotiation and protect ourselves and our economies as partners.
Merci, Monsieur Blanchet. Okay, we now move into open debate, and I'll start it off, Mr. Carney, with you, and then we go from
In
there.
any case, Sarah,
Do
I
you
don't
still
actually like
support
him. It's just I
dollar
love
for
his
dollar
voice.
tariffs, even if they ultimately threaten Canadian jobs and businesses.
No, and in fact, we've already moved off from dollar-for-dollar tariffs.
I'm already getting so distracted. I'm trying to pay attention to what's in the sandbox as well as what they're saying, and somebody in the sandbox will reference something I didn't pay attention to.
In terms of our counter tariffs, is to have maximum impact in the United States, as I said a moment ago, minimum impact here. So we have to think about the impact on Canadian businesses. I'll give you one example, if I may. In the auto sector, the way we've designed those auto tariffs is that Canadian automakers, if they maintain production here, if they maintain their investments here, when I say Canadian automakers, I mean automakers that have jobs and plants and production in Canada, then they can have lower tariffs on what they ship to the United States. We create a huge incentive for them in order to do that. We also have carved out the Canadian auto parts sector.
Says, I'm British, so this is like watching my cousins debate
the Canadian auto parts sector, so that it can remain competitive with the United States. We're focused on maximizing Canadian jobs, maximizing the harm in the U.S., so that we get them where we need them.
Mr. Poilievre, you want in, then Mr. Singh.
Maximizing Canadian jobs,
Mr. Carney,
maximizing the harm in the U.S.?
You claim that you want our country to respond with strength, but after the last decade, half of which time you've been Justin Trudeau's economic advisor, our economy is weaker than ever before. It's been the worst growth in the G7. We've lost $500 billion of investment south of the border. You supported blocking pipelines in Canada that gave Donald Trump and the U.S. a near monopoly over our energy. And now you want to keep in place Bill C-69, the liberal no new development law that blocks us from shipping our resources overseas. How could you possibly think it's a good idea to give the Americans a continued monopoly on our energy projects when you have seen how much these liberal policies have weakened our country over the last decade?
Let Mr. Carney respond, and then Mr. Singh.
Sure.
If I may, yes. So let's go to my record. My record is a month long as Prime Minister. And this goes to the heart of coming to the Americans with strength, but doing the right thing for Canada. Within the first week as Prime Minister, I sat down with all the premiers of the provinces and territories, as well as the leaders of the Indigenous peoples. Got an agreement with all the provinces and territories, doesn't happen very often, got an agreement for them to have one Canadian economy instead of 13, first point. Secondly, to commit the federal government to do its part by Canada Day, so free trade in Canada by Canada Day. Thirdly, the federal government to commit with respect to project reviews.
The question was about pipelines.
I'm getting to it. Thirdly, one project, one review, and relying on provincial. Yes, it is possible under our system.
No,
it is the impact assessment. It is agreed on under the impact assessment framework, and we have a cooperation agreement with British Columbia already. We're looking forward to them with the other provinces. We will move forward.
Mr. Singh's turn, please.
Of course, we agree around having a strategic response to the United States. But what I'm concerned about is what we're doing here in Canada. We are already seeing threats to our country in that just the threats alone of the tariffs have meant Canadians have lost their jobs. The threats of the tariffs that are in place right now, the impact of those tariffs is that we've lost jobs in steel, aluminum, in the auto sector.
For a lot of reasons.
People are already losing their jobs. And while Mr. Carney, you had time, as you mentioned, not very long time, but as Prime Minister, you showed us your priorities. The first thing you did is you had traveled, you made a tax cut for millionaires, which was reversing on the capital gains. So you gave a tax cut to millionaires.
I won't necessarily think it'll be fantastic,
but you didn't have time to increase the amount that workers get on EI. Right now, workers who are struggling and wondering, what am I going to do if I lose my job? Workers who've lost their job are saying, how do I pay my bills when EI only covers half of a worker's salary? Maybe 40 years ago that would have worked, but right now most workers are spending their entire salary just to pay the bills, to pay their mortgage and their rent, and to put food on the table. So EI is not good enough, and it shows Canadians that you didn't make it a priority to protect those that are impacted by these tariffs, that are threatened because their jobs are lost.
We have not heard from Monsieur Blanchet yet in this segment, so please.
Yeah, Mr. Carney, you are becoming a real Canadian leader, saying one thing in French and another one in English. You said in British Columbia in February that you would force oil and gas through pipelines through Quebec, either we wanted it or not. You would use emergency powers in order to do so. And 2 days later in Montreal, you said that you would never do that without the approval of Quebec. What's the point of using emergency powers if you do have
Philip,
the
their
agreement of
EI
Quebec.
is employment
However,
insurance.
I do agree with you. It's important to be very strong in front of Mr. Trump. However, I would keep the dollar for dollar policy. Don't be weak in front of Mr. Trump. And those counter tariffs have to be targeted. You have put out already $2 billion for Ontario auto industry, car industry, and the lumberwood industry in Quebec has already paid to United States $2 billion, and you have not raised one finger in order to help us.
Let's get from Mr. Poilievre and then a response from Mr. Carney.
Well, Mr. Carney refused to answer the question about pipelines. Just the other day, he said that he doesn't necessarily think we need to build
not
pipelines.
Not answering a question in debate?
Let me tell you what that means. Right now, the Americans get 97% of our oil, 100% of our natural gas exports at big discounts. We have to send Canadian oil from Western Canada through the States just to get it back to Quebec because we don't have a pipeline. And now there's this law, Liberal Law C-69, which effectively bans pipelines. The 14 biggest energy and resource companies say it has to go if we're ever going to build another project. And I asked Mr. Carney why he would keep in place this anti-pipeline law that effectively empowers Donald Trump to have a total monopoly on our single biggest export. Why would you not repeal this Liberal law? Isn't it because you are exactly the same in the same line as Justin Trudeau and the rest of the Liberal team that is now making up your cabinet?
Oh,
let's get a response.
Well, let me pick up a couple of points that have been made. The first thing I did as Prime Minister was to cut the carbon tax. That's the first thing. Second thing is made a commitment that all proceeds from our tariffs will go to workers and those companies most affected. There were several points raised.
Nothing so far.
If I may, Mr. Steve, if I may address, I'm trying to do it quickly because several points raised. All proceeds go to workers and the firms most effective, and those proceeds are considerable. Third thing, I'm interested in solutions. I'm interested in getting energy infrastructure built. That means pipelines, that means carbon capture, storage, that means electricity grids. And here's how you do it. And we've already moved in the first month. Cooperation agreements with the provinces. Guess what? We are a federation. You need to cooperate with Quebec. You need to cooperate with the provinces. You need to get First Nations and Indigenous people buy-in. You can do that through the one project, one review window that we put in place at that first ministers' meeting, as well as, if necessary, using emergency powers to fulfill the federal responsibility, but not the unique.
If he was Justin Trudeau saying that, I wouldn't believe him at all, because Justin Trudeau actually had the federal government invade Wet'suwet'en,
The No New Development Law,
which is
C-69,
Indigenous land.
guarantees there will not be a one-stop shop because it requires the government of Canada.
But since Mark Carney is new, I don't know how he'll actually act on this. So I am cutting him a little bit more of a benefit of doubt. So if he says that he's going to negotiate with Indigenous peoples and First Nations more,
that is not true. In fact,
I'd like to
Mr.
see
Singh,
that.
The reality is we should have strong rules enforced
it
once.
would be nice.
We shouldn't have multiple levels
and
of
it definitely
review.
separates him from Justin Trudeau.
It takes now 17 years to get a major project approved in this country. That is why in the last 10 years we've had the worst economic growth in the entire G7. We cannot afford a fourth Liberal term. We need a change, and the Conservative plan for a change will include repealing the anti-pipeline law so we can get our energy to markets other than the United States.
Mr. Singh, then Mr. Carney.
While these two compete about who's more pro-pipeline, I think what we need to do is, I mean, it's clear. The Liberals bought a pipeline. They built a pipeline. I don't know what Pierre is complaining about. That's what they did. I think what we need to do, if we're talking about energy in our country, we need to build an east-west grid. Let's use our power as a nation to build a national project that creates good jobs, that strengthens us for the future, where we connect the low-cost energy from jurisdictions and provinces across this beautiful land and have low-cost energy for businesses, for people, so we can build a stronger economy. That's the energy of the future that we need.
Mr. Carney.
3 quick points. First, the pipeline built, yes, TMX built. That's why oil exports up 50% over the course of the last few years. Secondly,
I don't think
Mr. Singh is absolutely right about the east-west grid. Grid interconnections, which is part of the energy corridor, huge opportunities for this country. We have to be able to do more than one thing. Third point, fundamental point. We can give ourselves far more than Donald Trump can ever
Anti-Case
take
Terra,
away.
Indian
If we had
Act
one
chiefs are
Canadian
not our
economy, not
traditional
13,
leaders,
if we
and the
just
Supreme
look
Court ruled
at
in
that
favor
agreement
of
we got with
trad
the
chiefs,
provinces,
and
look at what
that won't
Ontario and Nova
happen.
Scotia have just announced in terms of their steps
A lot of
towards
that
this.
was happening
This is
with
within our
Wet'suwet'en,
grasp.
where it's like,
Mr.
well, here are
Blanchet,
some
what should we
people
be
that
prepared
are
to concede
chiefs,
in our
but
negotiations
aren't
with the United
necessarily
States?
recognized by the bands
I
that are
want
there.
to be back to
And it's kind of
something that
like the
Mr.
federal
Carney said.
government, you
You
know,
can't
it
do
goes to one
something
parent,
and the
doesn't like their
opposite, and
answer,
you
so they
can't
try
fill
going to
people's
another
mind with
parent.
nonsense.
And then saying, well, that
Quebec
one said the
has,
opposite thing, so
by
we're just going to
law,
go with that
its
because it
own
favors what we want to do
environmental
anyway.
review institution, and you cannot, through a federal decision, even through a Quebec government decision, go over the BAP, as we.
Oops.
No,
Just say.
it's no.
I know.
Good.
I know,
Let's
but this
keep
is
that in mind.
This is the point. This is, if I may, this is the point. The federal government can do the following, which is to take the decision to abide by the decision of the Quebec BAP. That is within the federal government's power. That is known as cooperative
The Claire
federalism.
Kellyist,
That's what we need
don't
to
think
do.
I've seen you in the sandbox before. Welcome. Please don't be content. Once the election is over, build communication, community. If we are not organized and ready to push our politicians, we lose.
The building
Absolutely,
of those
100%
pipelines
agree
will
with that.
take at least
Right now,
10 to 14
Of the people on the stage,
years.
the race is between
Mr.
Mark Carney and Pierre
Trump will be
Poilievre.
90
I would
years
love the
old,
NDP
not
to get a
president
majority.
no
It's
more,
not going to
and
happen.
somebody-
It's
somebody,
not.
of
So it's
course,
between
less
those
terrible
two.
will be there before you can even
I'd much
dream
rather have Mark
of
Carney in that
having
position
oil
and
through
fight
this
him
pipeline of
than
yours.
Pierre
We're less than a
Poilievre.
minute to go. Mr. Poilievre, I promised you
Because
next.
with Mark Carney, we're fighting for
After
improvements.
the
With
last
Pierre
10
Poilievre, we're
years
fighting not
of
to have our
liberals
rights taken
blocking
away.
pipelines and killing jobs.
Sounds wild when you
we
say that.
actually,
Sounds
we
like-
actually need to get things
that makes
done.
sense.
We need a change, and our conservative plan for change will repeal the No New Pipelines law. It will create a true one-stop shop, set up shovel-ready zones with pre-permitting so that we can approve LNG liquefaction export plants, mines, pipelines, nuclear plants, and also
said no to that.
hydroelectric dams so that we can generate the power we need to be strong, self-reliant, and stand on our own 2
Can I-
feet for a change.
Last quick word to Mr. Carney.
Okay, quick word. Bringing it back to what we were talking about, which is tariffs, the threats to Canada, how to negotiate. We need these options. We need these options to build domestically, to build one Canadian economy. We need to act. We need to diversify our trade partners.
And that is
will
our
give us
time in this
strength to the
segment.
US.
That is our time. Okay,
I'm
you know
hoping
my job
Dan and
tonight. I
Bam
got to be
got
the
the
heavy
link
guy here
okay,
every now and then,
because they said
making
that
sure
they would
everybody
be
comes
here
to time.
by now.
And I'm keeping an eye as well on making sure that everybody gets rough justice over here. That concludes our first section and our first debate. Up next, affordability and the cost of living.
Our goal is to double the pace of housing construction.
It will lower your bills, build homes you can actually afford.
Il faudra parler des entreprises du Québec, des travailleurs du Québec, des aînés du Québec.
Right when I was about to send him the message,
Powerful bring it home
this is
tax
a good
cut
time
on work,
for Dan to come
investment, energy, and home.
Okay, so let me, again, this is going to be a bit clumsy as I do this. And then I do this. And then I do this. And then I do... there we go. Oh, nope, not that. And then, no, yeah, no, over here, that. Okay, now I do this. Okay, can you hear me okay, Dan?
Loud and clear. How am I coming in?
Good. I heard you. So first challenge of live streaming done. Welcome to the leaders debate here in Canada.
I feel right at home and on the longest vacation that I'll probably be taking in the next couple of years. Yeah, I was listening to thank you for me and Bam's tardiness. Some people call it colored people time. Other people call it Pacific Coast time. Either way, we're going to be late. But the thank you for having me on. I was listening to your coverage in the lead up to this, and it was perfect because I was on a little bit of a delay, and so I was able to hear the whole thing. Because I sped through the beginning bit that I almost missed. I opened with I feel right at home and also very far away is because I'm having to
They're
think
really feeling
of
squeezed from the
like
cost of living. That's one of the top things that people tell
I'm
me
to
about.
really fast. I'm
People
trying to
say,
remind
"I
myself of
can't
the
afford to buy
candidates,
groceries." Every time I
but
go
the
to
things they're
grocery
talking
store,
about feel very
it's
or
just
at least the
ongoing
dynamics
worry
feel very
and
reminiscent
this
of
feeling of anxiety that can I actually afford the
Harris
things that my
versus
family
Trump.
needs.
Yeah.
On top of that, people are worried about the cost of
Especially
housing.
as you were
Those are the two
describing
biggest
the
things I hear.
Lib Dem candidate.
We can do
Yeah.
things about
Well,
this.
my
Other
experience
countries are
with
taking
Canadian
concrete
debates is
steps.
that
We
they
can
actually
put in a
stay a
price
lot
cap
more
on
on
food essentials.
relevant
France has
issues
done it,
more so
Greece
than
has
in
done
the
it
United
to great
States,
success. It's
especially
brought
in their
down the
banter
cost of
back and
food
forth.
significantly in both those jurisdictions.
Oh, we
You can also ban
have
corporate
the United
landlords
States
from buying up
debates
the affordable
are.
homes to keep homes that are affordable.
I don't.
We can
I would
make
almost say
things better for
intellectual,
Canadians, but it
like
requires having the courage
wrestling,
to take on
like professional
the
wrestling,
powerful corporations
but
that are
like
ripping you
it's
off,
not that
that are
smart.
price
Oh,
gouging you. And
darn
we know
it.
that
I just
price
I didn't even know
realized.
the
is
Lincoln.
one of the major
I didn't
reasons
know the
why
Lincoln
food prices
Douglas
are going
debates
up.
were that
You're
good. They
never
might
gonna
have
hear
just been
Pierre
just like
Poilievre
propaganda.
or Mr. Carney talk about the
Okay.
fact that these
So
are the corporations
affordability
that
and
are
cost
That's
of
the
living.
time. Mr. Blanchet, I want to ask you about old age security, which will soon cost this country $100 billion annually. We
Are there
understand you
captions
would
by
like to
chance?
expand it. How would you pay for that?
We would want it to be just for everybody because the Liberals have created the discrimination
Bam is
against
here now
elders which
too.
are
Okay, I have to switch
65
screens
to
again.
75
Everyone be
years
patient
old,
with
having
me.
10%
You should still
less
be able to hear
income
this as I go
from
through
federal
it.
government than those who are over 75. But the best way to do it is to have everybody pay its fair share in terms of tax, which means that one should not be entitled to hide money in fiscal paradise in order not to pay him or his clients or friends, not to pay billions of dollars in taxes that could be used to help the situation of
There.
elders.
Okay.
Those are
Oh,
things
my
which are
screen is
supposed to
all
be
off. Okay.
applied to everybody. There are a lot of questions to be answered about that. Other ways to do it is to reduce the pressure on housing price to make sure that the whole budget of elders and families and workers can afford houses which have increased dramatically in price.
Merci, Monsieur Blanchet. That's time for this one. Mr. Carney, I want to ask you about housing, which over the past decade has gone from a problem to a crisis while the Liberals were in power. Is your policy on getting homes built any different from your predecessors, and how?
This is one of the reasons why I entered this contest. Because of the housing crisis, the cost of living crisis, the housing crisis, and the Trump crisis to help fix it. And I would say, look, the housing approach is fundamentally different because we need a fundamentally different approach. We need to build housing
And welcome to the live stream, Bam.
that we haven't seen since the end of the Second World War. We do need a fundamentally different approach. And with the fundamentally different approach, we can build an entirely new industry. So the question is how? Now, Mr. Poilievre and I agree on some things. Okay, I agree as well on reducing the tax on first-time home purchases as a way to buy. But I am focused on increasing the supply of homes and doing that in a way that uses Canadian technology and modular prefabricated housing, that uses Canadian lumber, including in reinforced timber, and uses Canadian workers. And in all respects, we're scaling up to double the rate of home building.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. That's time. We now move to open forum here. And Mr. Singh, you get the first comment.
I still want to see more zone
Many
changing
of
and
you
things
have
of that
pledged to
sort.
cut
There's
the
enough
GST
empty homes
on
right now
many aspects of
for
buying a
all
home.
unhoused
And Mr.
people
Singh, I
to
want to
have
ask
a
you,
place
would you
to
cut the
stay 6 times
GST
over.
on anything else in order to make life
There
more
needs to be
affordable?
more. There needs to
Absolutely.
be,
In fact, I'm the only one on
actually
the stage
taking
that
back
fought
property.
to give people a GST holiday. Interestingly, while the GST holiday helps working class folks, middle class folks by taking off the GST off essentials, the Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre
Could you
voted
remind us
against
what the
that.
GST is?
They oppose the
Goods
idea
and
of giving
services
people,
tax.
actual folks that need help,
I thought that
tax
guy was
break,
gonna get the
would
defense
rather
minister or
give
something.
millionaires a tax break, which shows you whose side he's on, which is not surprising. But what is
Wasn't he like the
surprising that
defense
Mr.
minister
Carney
or something
also
like that?
said that giving people a break
I can
on their
hear you,
GST
but it
is a
was a
bad
bit
idea.
gurgly. What was
Mr.
that
Carney,
again?
why do you think
Is
giving
that,
a tax
was
break
he the
to
defense minister or
Catholic
no?
gays folks that earn more than $1 million
Jugby?
is a good idea? But
Yeah,
how
no?
paying a family
No, he's the
afford their groceries,
leader of
helping
the
people afford their
NDP.
bills,
NDP.
their internet, their
Right,
cell phone, their
okay,
home
yeah.
heating, giving them relief to take the GST off those is a bad idea. But giving a tax break to people who really only earn over more than $1.4 million, that's somehow a good idea.
Okay, you went after
That's your numbers.
You went after Mr. Poilievre first, so I'm going to give him the first shot to respond.
Well, Mr. Carney, the reality is that housing costs doubled under the Liberal government, while Justin Trudeau made exactly the same promises that you are now repeating today. He promised that he would double home building. In fact, home building went down. He promised that he'd reduce the cost. In fact, it went up. And now here we are. Mark Carney is asking for a fourth Liberal term, repeating the exact same Liberal promises that priced you out of a house. Just a few weeks ago, before the election, the Liberals voted against taking the GST off new homes, and they have
housing
continued to build up
unaffordability crisis
bureaucracies that block
started
construction.
under
We
the
need a
Conservatives
change so that you
when
can
this
afford a home.
douche
And our
canoe
change
was
will
housing
be,
minister.
again, to axe the sales tax on new homes, incentivize municipalities to speed up permits, free up land, and cut development costs. Train up 350,000 young people who can be in the trades to build those homes and sell off the land that is going to be needed in order to build homes.
This is
That
way
is
too
a
polite.
real plan.
Let Frank
a
Blanchett
real
speak.
plan for you to own a home and afford your life for a change.
Mr. Carney, they're coming at you from both sides. What do you say?
Okay. I know it may be difficult, Mr. Poilievre. You spent years running against Justin Trudeau on the carbon tax, and they're both gone. Okay, they're both gone. And we're
doing a
in
pretty
a
good
new
impersonation of them with the same policies tonight.
very different. Look, I'm a very different person from Justin Trudeau. Focus is on results.
Were you his economic
And so how
advisor?
to drive results in the housing market, you've got to change the model of building. You've got to increase the financing for housing developers, $25 billion on the table for those housing developers, $10 billion for deeply affordable homes, cutting development charges in half, lowering the cost of the building of those homes by 20%, and lowering the emissions and the run costs of those homes by another 20%. This is how you drive affordability. This is how you bring young
need
people
socialized
back
housing.
into the housing
You got
market.
Monsieur Blanchet and then Mr. Singh.
That's the first time in
claim
this
to be
debate
very different
I've heard
from
anyone
Mr.
mention
Trudeau.
even slightly the
No,
climate.
the point is
and
to
it's
show that you are only better
personalized
than Mr.
down
Trudeau.
to
You
your
claim
own
to
responsibility.
have a lot of experience in many
Even Jack Meat
things,
was like,
and you know
no
things.
Green New
Last
Deal. I
time
just
we
want to
had
unite the
somebody
grid.
saying that they knew
Trust me,
things,
Edmonton,
it
I'm
was
not
the
touching your oil.
senators, and they killed the law that protected supply management because they knew better than us and were elected by nobody, exactly like you are today. You say that you are a great crisis manager. Which one? I heard of nothing. As far as I know, Brexit happened, even if you were against it. You say you are a great negotiator. What have you negotiated but fiscal paradises in Bermudas or Cayman Islands? You have to prove something, and you have to reveal what you own in those companies if you want people to believe you.
Mr. Singh, you wanted it.
Yes, returning to the topic of housing. Now, it's very important. Obviously, we need to build homes that people can afford. Mr. Poilievre had the opportunity to show us what he could do. He was the Minister of Housing under Stephen Harper. And during that time, guess how many homes he built? He built 6 homes during that entire time. This is not something you can trust.
Homes that he then
built
rented out.
200,000. And this has been confirmed again and again. He built 6 homes. That's it. Now, the problem, though, with Mr. Carney is while he's laid out a plan, the problem is that when he was the chair of Brookfield Investments, this is a company that made a strategic decision to buy up affordable homes in cities like Toronto where people were paying a decent rent. And they purposely bought those homes, kicked out the tenants, and jacked up the rents. That is not someone you can trust, sadly, to deal with the housing crisis when, Mr. Carney, you profited off of it.
We're going to get responses here. Mr. Poilievre first, Mr. Carney second.
First of all, Mr. Singh,
gonna hold this up to remind you.
the Toronto
6 right here.
Star, the Toronto Star debunked your falsehoods
it was 6
on that.
homes, and
I
that's the
appreciate
facts.
neither Liberals or NDP are very good with math, but in that year, the year I was the minister, if I could,
which is great.
the year I
Mr.
was,
Singh, let's let him answer.
in the year I was,
high enough, though.
the year I was minister, we had 200,000 homes built, and guess what the average price of a home was at the time? $450,000.
And guess what happens?
And
Not 200,000 homes
rented
built.
out for $900. And that since that time, housing costs have actually doubled under the Liberals.
They doubled
and
under Conservatives, too.
Now we have Mr. Carney making tens of billions of dollars of spending promises that will
doubled under
ultimately
you as well.
continue to build bureaucracy. We don't need more bureaucracy in Ottawa. We tried that for 10 Liberal years, Mr. Carney. What we need is to build homes in communities.
Certainly
and
don't
that
need
means
Conservatives.
axing taxes on home building and getting the government out of the way so that builders can actually build.
I think-
Mr. Carney,
Yeah, because removing red tape is
housing will
always
change,
the best
and you,
way
sir,
to
are
go.
not a change.
Mark Carney.
I'm going to pick up on, I thought that answer was quite revealing. The first thing
Oh, and I was saying that
is
sarcastically because it's
an
always run
attitude
into nightmare
towards
scenarios
housing
when that has happened.
absolutely ignores affordable housing, deeply affordable housing, issues with vulnerable people, ignores the rental market, ignores all other aspects of it. So the 6 are
You
the relevant.
mentioned
Mr. Singh
rental?
is absolutely right. The 6 are the relevant.
200,000.
The 200,000 are a different part of the housing market.
Is that Drake's
There
6?
are many Canadians. There are many Canadians at different income levels. The second thing it reveals is a misunderstanding, or, well, a misunderstanding, I'll be polite, of how the government's balance sheet can catalyze enormous private investment. And that is what we need to do to
really want to
solve
hear
the
more
housing
about
crisis. It
rentals,
happens to
though,
be
because they
what
always
we
talk
need to
about
do as a
houses
whole
and building
to
houses and
address
housing
the
affordability.
economic crisis
But
that's been
so
forced
many
on
people
us
rent, so
by
many more
President
people are
Trump.
having to rent because they
Blanchet?
can't
Yeah.
afford homes and stuff like that. Where's the
You have
affordable
spoken
rent
much
coming
more
in,
than I
like
have, so I
rent
won't ask a
controls and things of
question.
that
I will
sort?
make a statement instead.
But the supply side
I'm not
thinking
saying
that
you
if you
cannot
have
do
more
what you
housing
pretend
stock,
that you are able to
that
do.
will
We
drive
just
down
have
the
no
rents.
proof so
But if
far.
they're
Because
saying,
landlords will
yeah.
go,
I'm saying quite
oh no,
clearly
that
that
out of
you
my good,
cannot be
of the goodness of my
entitled
heart,
to
I'll
do it
lower the
alone.
rent.
You cannot be entitled to hold all the
Never
power
happens,
in your
and
two
a lot of these
hands.
will be
You
like,
cannot go
like
out there
family
and
homes
fix
and things
things
of
for
that sort.
Canada
And it's like,
Quebec
no, we need
without
more
being seriously
affordable,
checked by serious
socialized
people.
rental
You cannot
apartments.
go out there and speak for Quebec without Quebec having its own strong voice to protect itself and to promote its different economy. So if you want to collaborate, let's say right now that whatever happens, even if minority government happens, you will be a partner with the different Quebec economy and identity, which you have been not interested in for the economic part and not respectful for the identity part.
Let me get Mr. Singh in at this point. Can you tell us what's the first thing you would do to make life more affordable for Canadians?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we can do, and I've laid out some of those things. I think fundamentally, I'm the only person on stage that not only fought for real relief for people in terms of affordability, I'm the only one that fought for pharmacare that actually makes life more affordable by giving people medication coverage, dental care that gives people more affordability by letting them access their services if you're a senior and a kid. I fought for childcare to make sure people could afford childcare. All measures that Mr. Poilievre voted against, all measures that Mr. Blanchet voted against. So if you want someone that's going to fight for you in Ottawa to actually make life more affordable, you can't entrust all the power to Mr. Carney. He doesn't have a track record of making life more affordable for people, but we do. So vote for a New Democrat, and we'll continue this work.
Jagmeet is
make
still
life more
talking
affordable
past
for you.
tense for
While
a
the
lot of
Conservatives
things.
and the Bloc have voted against
Like, I
those
don't-
measures to make life affordable.
At this point,
That's
I
not
don't
who
care
they
what he
about.
did. I
The
want to know
Democrats are in it
what
for
he
you.
plans on doing.
The #1 expense for families today is taxes, more than they spend on food, clothing, and shelter combined. This after
And where
10
do our
years
taxes
of
go,
liberal tax
Pierre,
increases.
to our
We can't
health care and
afford
things of that sort?
a
If you start
fourth
cutting
term
all of
high
that, then we're
liberal
going to have
taxes.
problems
That's
with
why
health care.
Conservatives have a plan for change. And that plan
Your plan
includes
voted
cutting
against every measure to help people out.
cutting income taxes by 15% for the average worker and seniors, saving a working couple up to $2,000, rewarding hard work again. Because
How much
hard
do you think
work
childcare
is
costs?
actually being
Dental care
punished.
costs.
Is actually being punished because of the very high taxes. Now, the Liberals promised 10 years ago they would lower them. They actually raised taxes on 9 out of 10 Canadians. We need a change in this country because your hard work should once again pay off with a powerful paycheck that buys you an affordable affordable home
So you want to save
on a
people
safe street.
$2,000,
And that's what we will deliver.
You want to save people $2,000, but cut their dental care,
That's
which
false.
is thousands of dollars.
False.
Cut their child care, which is thousands of dollars.
False.
Cut pharmacare coverage, which is thousands of dollars.
False.
That's not a very good math deal right there. You're going to save people $2,000, but cost them tens of thousands of dollars. That's why you cannot afford Conservatives, and you certainly can't trust the Liberals
Mark
on
Carney's
their own.
turn.
You need New Democrats.
Thank you for stating that,
I'm going to
Jagmeet.
reinforce
That's
that point,
the
and then I'll
plan.
respond to Mr. Blanchet.
Make
Child
people
care
think
in
like
this
you're
country,
saving because you
$3,000
cut
to
the taxes, but then
$10,000
suddenly
a
everything
year
else
for
goes
a
up.
family, depending on where you live.
Province, jurisdiction.
Depending on where you live, that's what's being saved there. $800 per trip to the dentist. We've expanded dental
Province,
care to 8
jurisdiction.
million Canadians.
Because we forced
8 million Canadians.
because New Democrats were there.
Pharmacare. These are fundamental issues for affordability. We're talking about affordability and taking them off in order.
That's why you need
to
New
cut
Democrats.
tax.
That's not what I've said.
And
I
in
will be
terms
cutting
of
income taxes
working with Quebec,
for Canadians.
yes, absolutely. Throughout the short time I've been Prime Minister, working directly with the Premier of Quebec, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, our Minister of Finance are from Quebec. Quebec and Quebec issues, whether it's
Why
supply
haven't you answered
management,
Mr.
language,
Legault's letter? He asked 5 things in the letter. He reduced his expectations.
We're talking about-
And you did not even answer him. And tonight, You are so much in love with Quebec.
Steve, the question that Canadians have to ask.
Why vote for Conservatives when the same
He's got the Mr. Singh, sorry, he has the floor. Come
on. The question you have to ask is, after a decade of Liberal promises, can you afford food? Is your housing more affordable than it used to be? What is your cost of living like compared to what it was a decade ago? And are you prepared to elect the same Liberal MPs, the same Liberal ministers,
It goes up just like it goes up under Conservatives.
All over again for a fourth term.
And it's usually worse under Conservatives.
Justin Trudeau's staffers are actually here with you at this debate in Montreal, writing the talking points that you are regurgitating into the microphone. How can we possibly
But it is good that Jagmeet at least said that the NDP had to force them for the pharmacare and dental care, because during COVID, when there was actually a vote on the floor for pharmacare,
I do my own talking.
The Liberals
points.
voted against it.
The biggest risk we have to affordability, the biggest risk
I am
we have
seeing
to
a lot
this
of, like,
economy is
again,
Donald Trump.
parallels
So
between
first
what
and foremost,
America
we've
just
got to
went
get
through.
that right. Secondly,
and
we
that,
need to do it in a way that brings
Pierre's
everyone
sort of like
along together.
angle
that
is to
means
tie
preserving
Carney
pharmacare,
to Trudeau as
dental care,
much as
childcare,
possible.
Reinforcing health
And
care, spending our
intrusion,
Carney speaks like Al Gore, I'm gonna be honest. Like, he just never gets to the point. This is like me hosting Power Reports. It takes like 20 minutes just to like make a point. It's just like, it's troubling. Because if I'm acting like an ignorant person, Pierre is just arguing from a stronger position, attacking the incumbent or the incumbent party. It's wrong, but like, I'm just speaking as an ignorant person, because that's probably how ignorant people are watching it.
And let everybody finish their
I
point.
get that, but the thing that has actually surprised me a lot about Mark Carney is he has done things to separate himself from Justin Trudeau, like right off the bat. Commercial.
Fight crime to protect Canadians.
He is already, like, he came out against, so Mark Carney came out against, I believe it was his father or father, for saying really horrible things about residential schools. And being kind of on the denial side of that. And Mark Carney came out and said, you know, I love my father. I do not agree with those statements. And not only did he mention the residential schools, he also mentioned day schools, which often go forgotten because residential schools just changed into day schools. Whereas Justin Trudeau, whose father was prime minister while over 60 residential schools were still running, had said nothing about it.
I think the old border
Bam, what are you
thing
thinking so
is
far?
a real issue. Immigration is a very important issue for Quebecers. Immigration has to be dealt with in an orderly fashion. Our borders are not dealt with in an orderly fashion. The rules are not respected. The rules are unclear. Some rules even invite people to hide for 2 weeks illegally before coming out.
Yo, he's
Some
talking
things
about
has to
us,
be done.
Bam.
The
What border do
situation
they
of
have?
one person asking for asylum may take as much as
Where are the
4
Mexicans now, Bam?
years without us reducing the number in order to deal with them in a human way. The services for every citizen in Quebec are being reduced because we cannot afford the fact that we are receiving much, much more people in Quebec from this specific type of immigration than we can afford, and we cannot teach them French.
That's time, Mr. Blanchet. We can, of course, return to the immigration issue during open debate, should you choose to. Mr. Carney, question for you. The Liberal gun buyback
Or people who might
policy,
want to wear religious
not
symbols while
considered a
going to
success
work.
by many people. Reviving
Because
it
in
is
Quebec,
in your
they actually
platform.
had a bill passed
Why would it
to
work this time?
stop that from
I
happening
think,
for
well,
government
what we've
workers.
seen with that policy is some success at the
Forgiving friends.
commercial level, but not at the individual level, because it hasn't been, in my opinion, it hasn't been organized
Giving
properly,
Louisiana.
and it needs to be organized properly. And I've instructed the Minister of National Security and Public Safety in order to do that. So part of this is a different focus of government, a focus on results, a focus on clear milestones in the short term. Let me make a broader point, though, on gun, which is that we have a problem with guns coming over borders, which is why we've tightened our borders. We have an issue, though, with a gun industry that is continually coming up with new forms of assault rifles, mass killing machines. We banned over 2,000 of these. Every single time there has been a vote in the House of Commons on gun control, Mr. Poilievre has voted against it. You can't be tough on crime unless you're tough on guns.
Mr. Polyev, you can come back on that
He's
in
made
the
that
open
into
debate
his
if you want to,
slogan.
but my question for you in this segment is, Indigenous people are statistically overrepresented in our correction system. Are you concerned that your Tough on Crime platform will make that worse?
I'm concerned that Indigenous people are disproportionately the victims of crime. I give you the example of a wonderful group of Indigenous people who came under attack in Saskatchewan, and many of them were murdered. The killer was out of jail after 60 prior convictions. This is the result of 10 years of liberal laws that allow the same offenders to be released dozens and dozens of times, even when it's known they are a danger. We can't risk a fourth liberal term of soft on crime policies. We need a change. And the Conservative plan for change
What a way to
will
not
bring in a
answer the
3
question.
strikes you're outlaw. 3 convictions for serious crimes, you go to jail for at least 10 years, maybe for life, no chance of parole or
3 strikes,
bail.
you're out rule
We
is
will
what he
bring in
wants.
life sentences for traffickers of fentanyl, human beings, and guns, and we will secure our borders to keep the illegal
Thank you,
guns
Mr.
out.
Polyev. That's time. Mr. Singh, your question is about the RCMP, because you've got RCMP reform in your platform. What, in your view, is the problem with the RCMP?
Well, some of the basis for this is the concern that's been raised in more rural communities and northern communities that there have been some serious
For
concerns
people who
about
don't know,
violence
RCMP stands
or
for
inappropriate
racist,
use of force when it comes to
mounted police.
the execution of their duties. We want to make sure that we've got
You had me in
top-tier
the first
police
half.
force
Racist
that provides
Canadian mounted
security and
police.
safety to those communities
Or
in a way
racist
that's
Canadian
sensitive
mounted
and
pigs.
understanding of the communities they're serving. I also think what's very important is for Indigenous communities, Indigenous policing. This is an area of deep concern. I think everyone in our country should be safe. You should be able to be safe at home, safe when you go to work, safe if you take public transit, safe for your kids to be able to play in the local playground. And that's something I'm committed to. The other area that I'm focused on when it comes to public safety is making sure we prevent crime before it happens. And that's why we want to see increased investments in our border security. We saw under the Conservatives, they cut 1,100 border officers in one day. So that
close.
prevented our ability to keep
He
our border
said to
safe. That
to
stops those
prevent crime
materials.
before it
That's
starts,
time.
but then he
Not
went
sure
to
it was
the
about
border as
RCMP,
opposed
but
to like
maybe we can
other
get back
social
to that
services
during the open
and
debate
stuff. It was
segment,
like, close.
which we go to right now. And Mr. Polyev, you get the first word on this one, and it sort of
Most of our
dovetails on the
criminals
last
are not
answer you
coming over the
gave, which
border. They're
is
already here.
you have pledged to be the first prime
But
minister in
Sandy, I
this
hear
country to use the
Canada's so much
notwithstanding
more
clause,
progressive than
setting
America.
aside charter
There's no
rights
moderates
of,
there.
as you call them, multiple
Even the
murderers.
left is actually fighting for
Why do
things.
you think that's necessary?
Sarcasm.
To be clear, I want to
Well,
uphold the charter rights of
generally
Canadians
speaking,
under
we
Section
are more
7
progressive.
to life,
Still.
liberty, and security of the person. Right now, that right
More
is
mention of
violated
climate change in the American
by multiple
debates.
murderers who are given discounts. The case in question was a gentleman who went into a mosque and shot dead 6 innocent worshipers. He got, according to this ruling, only one 25-year sentence, meaning he can be out in his 50s. He only serves 4 years for every murder that he carried out. That is outrageous.
He still
and
needs
I
to
will
qualify
use
for parole.
the
Like,
constitutional powers
they
that
don't
are
just
created for this
automatically get
purpose
released
to
after
ensure that mass murderers stay in maximum security penitentiary.
It's interesting
for
how the
life.
Conservatives
they will
trying to
only
go
come out
towards,
in a
like,
box. We will
the
also pass tough new laws that prevent
conservative
repeat
part
offenders from
of
getting out. If you commit 3
groups of
offenses under
color,
the
so to
3
speak,
strikes
like
law
the
I
indigenous
propose,
groups,
you will
the,
not be allowed out of jail until you
Muslim
prove
groups.
that you are drug-free,
It's a lot of crime wave
that
stuff,
you are
but it's
behaved
like
perfectly, and that you've learned an employable skill,
really
and you've served a
about
10-year sentence.
trying
We
to
cannot
appeal
allow
to a
liberal
massive,
crime and
broad
chaos to
audience,
go
which
on
I find interesting.
terrorizing
It's
our
not like
communities.
full-on white
What we
nationalism,
need
which
is a
is
real plan for change so that we
scraping
can
the bottom
bring
of the
back
barrel,
the
but interesting
safety
to see.
and the
Kind of
security that
surprising.
Canadians used to take for granted.
Let me get Mr. Carney to respond to that. Do you think that's an appropriate use of the notwithstanding clause of the Charter?
I think that the one of the core responsibilities of the federal government, Prime Minister, is to defend the fundamental rights and liberties of Canadians. And those fundamental rights and liberties of Canadians are outlined in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is 43 years old literally today. I think it's a very dangerous slope to override judgments of the Supreme Court of Canada. In fact, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms exists to protect Canadians from people like us on the stage, politicians who may use their power to override fundamental rights. And the issue in using by the federal government, I'll stop here, is not where you start, but where will you stop?
Mr. Polyev, I should get Mr. Polyev on that. Is it a slippery slope?
That was a good
I
answer.
must say, I would be quite interested too, because Mr. Carney said that he didn't want us to use the notwithstanding clause before adopting a law. And yesterday he said that he felt that it was wrong to use the notwithstanding clause after a law is adopted. So if we cannot use it before and we cannot use it after, it means that Mr. Carney believes that we should never use it. But it is very important. And the Ford case made it clear. The Constitution says how it should be used, but never how or what we will do with it, because it's the prerogative of the provinces. So do you want the Supreme Court to overrule another judgment of the same Supreme Court because you don't like it? Because that would be being the hell of a politician as you define them.
Well, let me just start by saying, first of all, yeah, thank you. I just started by saying, let's not let Mr. Polyev get away with making this ludicrous claim that anyone on this stage thinks that violent crime should get a less severe penalty. Obviously, that is not a special position that he's taking. Everyone agrees that horrible crimes should have horrible sentences. Judges are equipped to do that, so don't let Mr. Polyev's rhetoric confuse people. Obviously, everyone agrees that if someone does something horrible, they should pay a horrible price for it. There should be appropriate sentence that's put in place by a judge. But what I'm concerned about is all of what Mr. Polyev is talking about is after the fact. Now, there's heinous things that happen, and there needs to be severe penalties put in place. But we also need to keep communities safe. And that's what my focus is. Well, how do we stop crime before it happens? Much of the violent crime that's committed is committed by illegal handguns and firearms that come across the border. Now, Mr. Polyev has admitted that as well, that it is illegal handguns and illegal weapons that are used in violent crime.
They're coming across the border from Mexico?
Our plan is, let's stop those illegal weapons getting into our country in the first place. And the way we do that is by having stronger
I wonder if illegal handguns is just code for like illegal immigrants.
Mr. Pierre Polyev, when he was in power in the Conservatives, they
illegal
cut the
ghost
number of
guns
border
from
officers.
Greenland.
They reduced the number, weakening our borders.
Keeping an eye on
We
time
can't
here.
trust them
Let's
to
get
do
back
these
to
type of
Mr.
things.
Polyev on the issue
Like
of
he goes
whether
so close to
using the
saying,
notwithstanding
like, you
clause
need
under
to
these
deal with crime
circumstances
before it
would be a kind
happens,
of a
but
slippery slope
the
and
vast
encourage
majority of our
politicians to
crime
use
isn't
it more.
happening because people are coming over the border
we will use it
with
to
guns.
protect the
The
charter
criminals are
rights
already
of
here.
law-abiding Canadians. I'm
I don't know why
interested in the
Jagmeet
rights of
holds back
victims.
so much.
Mr. Carney
You should either
seems to be very
decide to
interested
give Carney
in the
all
rights
the
of
credit
criminals.
so that
He says
wins,
that it's dangerous
and he's in a better
for me
position,
to
or
ensure
because
that mass murderers stay
CBC
behind
poll has
bars
him,
for life. You know what's
aggregate polls
dangerous?
has him at
Turning them loose on our streets.
8.5%.
I don't think
to
you appreciate, sir,
40%
the
for
chaos
liberal
that is
conservative.
unfolding in communities.
Like,
in
you're not saying.
Toronto right now,
Just say the
the
things.
police
Like,
have been forced to tell
establish something
people
for the party to have a standard for,
just let
and
people let the thief steal
maybe
the
it'll
car.
help you.
When
I
they
don't know.
break into the house, just take the keys.
Did Dan just
let them
quote
take the
a
keys
poll
so that you
while
don't get
on my
hurt.
show?
People are living in terror in many of our communities,
sorry if I did
precisely
some
because of the
research.
catch and release bail
I'm
law,
very anti-poll on my show.
C-75, which requires judges release the accused
I couldn't
at
find
the
538
earliest opportunity
Canada.
under the least onerous
338.
conditions. Every single member of your Liberal caucus and your Liberal cabinet voted in favor of this bill, and they're all determined to keep it in place despite constant promises to the contrary. Mr. Carney, Canadians deserve to live in peace and security. That is the right that I'm fighting for a change.
I'm
Autumn
fighting
leaves
for
in
that
chat.
as well. And let me
MS13
be
in
specific
Canada is
about two
maple
things that have
syrup
been raised.
13.
The first is with respect to these issues of car theft, home invasion, and I'll use the GTA area where there has been a sharp increase. How do you attack that? You attack it several ways. One, you increase the criminal penalties for that
Home
happening.
invasion in Canada. One,
Particularly
use
if
your
you're
laws.
part of a gang, particularly if you use a firearm.
And you will
doing
do
so.
that?
And we're doing so. We've committed to doing so. You put in place a reverse onus in terms of bail so that it has to be proven that there's not a risk, which we've also committed to. And then you go to what Mr. Singh was talking about, which is we have to reinforce our frontiers. That's why we're committing to an extra 1,000 Canada Border Service agents, an extra 1,000 RCMPs. That's why, as part of the broader fentanyl initiative, where we've added to the RCMP there, we've added drones, we're adding helicopters, we're adding surveillance,
and just, you
we're
know,
going
punishing
to the
criminals
other end of the
even
chain with
more
respect to
doesn't
car theft,
stop more
which is
crime from
tightening security
happening.
at the ports.
Because it doesn't change the
This is
material
what we need.
reasons
In
why
order
they
to
got
get
into the
results,
crimes in the first
you
place.
need to focus
And again,
where
just
at both
focusing
ends of the
on
chains
all
of
these people
federal
coming
government.
over the
Thank you very much. I
border
wanna talk
isn't the
about,
actual
one of the issues
issue.
that's
It's
come
the
up
material
is the idea of
living
the public
standards,
safety
quality of
concerns
life that
around the
people are
overdose
dealing
crisis,
with.
and how this is devastating our communities. We're seeing so many lives being lost. In that, we know that one of the ways to address that is by investing in some of the solutions like mental health services and rehabilitation services. Services keep our communities safe, having access to those good services. Both Mr. Carney and Mr. Poilievre are proposing cutting government spending and cutting those services. That's not going to make our communities safer. We need to see better investments in rehabilitation services, more investments in mental health. We need to respond to this serious crisis in our country with care and compassion. I met with Moms Stop the Harm, an organization of moms that have lost their children to this opioid overdose crisis. They've literally had their children have died because of this. And they're saying we need to do everything possible to save lives, to stop this death from happening. And I think we need to listen to those moms, and that's my commitment.
Mr. Blanchet.
Two things as
Well, at least you
rapidly as
mentioned,
possible.
more
First,
help
we
for
believe
mental
that
health.
we should act
Why
on
not actually
crime
include
gangs
that
and
into the Healthcare
organizations,
Act?
defining them as we do for
To the
terrorist
earlier piece,
organization.
you definitely
We
rubbed
have
me the
to
wrong way about
protect our
crime.
kids from
Jet put in
the
the chat,
violence of those gangs.
if I'm not
from
mistaken,
drugs
excessive
being
punishment
sold by those
has the
gangs,
opposite effect as
from
intended. That's from Jet in the
guns
chat.
and
And
whatever
yeah, it's
else
very,
being stolen.
you know, even the liberal option, even the progressive option, quote unquote,
sale
has to be about
being
punitive. You know,
by
to
those
quote
gangs
Jack Meat,
and
horrible
not
punishments for
sold,
horrible
being,
crimes,
you know,
right?
You purchase a thing. Selling. Sold,
Yeah, and, you know,
sold by those gangs.
I'll leave it there.
And we mostly have to protect our kids
What's
from
happening to
being
them while they're in the
recruited
prison,
by
though? Are
those
they being
gangs,
rehabilitated,
becoming
or are they
violent at
just
13 and
going to be
14 and
worse when they come out?
16,
Like, it's just, there's
years
so...
old, because this is the real
Just
fear
punishing
of
people for the
parents
sake of
like I
punishing them,
am.
increasing
This is
punishments
a very
without
dangerous
any
situation. I want to come back to
change
immigration
to the
because we said
environment
we
that
would come back to
caused them to
immigration.
go
Do you
down that
remember
road in the first
the
place won't
Century
change the
Initiative, a
criminal
sad memory.
statistics.
Officially, they
Yeah, one
said
thing
that they
I'm
had
trying to
not
remind people
considered
not to bring
Quebec
everything back to
difference. They had
America,
not considered Quebec
but
language. They wanted
it's just what I'm more
Canada
comfortable
to
speaking
be
to very
Yeah.
directly.
Oh,
but I
an
think there's parallels
American
here.
wanting to make everything about
country
America?
by the end
What?
of the century. Mr. Barkley
Sorry,
told
to
myself,
make it even
told
worse, I'm
me
also British.
himself
But
that he had not even thought about the Quebec difference.
when you
in
people are
that
getting sent
analysis.
to
And one of his
El Salvador, when they're getting sent to
is now
Secot,
a close counselor to Mr. Carney,
and they're
which
saying,
seems
"Oh,
to
they're
be
part of Tren de
that
Aragua, they're part
kind
of MS-13."
project or
Those
ideology.
are
So
prison
it is
gangs
impossible for Canada
that
to
started in the United
have all
States.
those people coming to Canada. It is
So
impossible for
much
Quebec
like,
to
you know,
receive all
creating the
those
conditions
people.
where
And in
you're
Quebec, we have the language and
making
values and
groups like
secularity of the
Hamas's
state
point
issue, which
for
is
them.
very important.
Oh, we're
And
missing
basically,
some really
I say,
racist things that this guy is saying.
Pose.
Sorry, let's
do
go.
things properly. Let's receive migrants in an orderly fashion and successfully as a measure of respect for them also.
Mr.
Oh, he was just saying, you know, certain ideologies and all that sort of stuff, and they need to have certain language.
Scourge of
He was-
drugs and illegal guns.
He was going very
And we know those
typical
guns are not Grandpa Joe's
Quebec
hunting
leader
rifle.
speak.
So when the Liberals try to ban hunting rifles, they're really going after the wrong people.
Amazing.
90% of guns that come into are used in
But yeah,
crime
like,
are smuggled illegally
point,
over
you
the
can't
porous liberal run
send people to
borders.
jail with no
And that's
point
why I
or
cut
prison
border
Yeah.
officers
with
not
no
true.
idea
That's why
or
the police
plan to
are-
rehabilitate
actually,
people
if I could,
and not
the police
expect these
actually
systems of
enforce
violence to
the police
perpetuate.
in Barrie,
People shouldn't
in
come out of
Peel,
prison more
in
broken than
Sault
when they
Ste. Marie
went
have
in.
all endorsed me because they know that
'Cause
I will go after
then
gun
nothing
smugglers and
changes.
criminals with 2,000 extra frontline border guards that will stop the guns
After you
from
cut
I'll be right
coming
back.
in.
I'm gonna get some
But
Canadian
unlike
snacks.
the Liberals and NDP, I will not ban hunting rifles. The Liberals want to
We never
protect.
wanted to ban
I
them.
want to
That's
protect Canadians
made up.
from criminals. The Liberals want to protect turkeys from hunters. I think we know which one makes the most
Carney,
sense.
quick intervention, Mr. Carney, and then I got a question for each of you before this segment's out.
Okay. We absolutely fully support hunting and rights of hunters and Indigenous Canadians. But I want to raise an issue, which is a serious issue, talking about safety. There are people, we're in Montreal, in Toronto, across this country, who fear going to their synagogue, fear going to their community center, fear taking their children, leaving their children in school. And this has to stop. This is it's totally unacceptable. So what we're proposing is to make it a criminal offense to threaten or to impede anyone from being near or going to their place of worship, their school, their community center. This, it pains me that when we have to do it, because this is not what we should be doing as Canadians, of course, but we will put that in place.
Let me get
and this is a fundamental issue with respect
Let me
to
get 10 seconds from each of you before this segment's out on what you perceive to be the biggest security threat to Canada right now. 10 seconds each. Mr. Poilievre.
The physical security threat to our country is the rampant crime wave that is running out of control. After the last decade, we had a 116% increase in gun crime. We need to lock up the criminals.
I got to hold you to 10 seconds. Mr. Carney?
Well, we're in a security section. I think we didn't have a chance to talk about anything internationally. I think the biggest security threat to Canada is China.
China, you say?
I actually think
Mr.
it's the
Singh.
United States
biggest
right
security
now.
threat, illegal guns and drugs coming across the border, and cuts to services that would make our public safety and security even worse.
Okay,
Last word to
cuts
Mr.
to
Blanchet.
services.
The fact that neither Quebec or Canada is able to protect itself and that we are still dependent and entirely dependent on Americans to protect us.
Okay, that is the end of that section, gentlemen. Up
Fox
next,
News
energy
soundbite.
and climate.
Oh, we're going to be talking about climate next.
Improving pipelines, getting
Finally.
things built, unleashing production.
We are
Got my all-dressed chips.
Ah,
Real Canadian here.
oh, ketchup chips. I think all dress is also very Canadian.
I just want to say I'm against hunting too. So.
I'm against hunting for sport.
Change. I know how much all of you love talking about pipelines, so here we
I'm
go.
pro
Mr.
hunting
Singh,
human
you
beings.
first. Should Canada build new pipelines to get our oil
kidding,
and gas
that's
to
a joke.
market?
Well, it's not an approach I favor with public money. There's not any projects that are on the table, so it's not a specific project to look at. I favor, when it comes to the environment, building an east-west energy grid that connects low-cost energy and allows for families to reduce their electricity costs. But let's put this all in context. We're talking about what our energy solutions are in the context of a climate crisis. And we're not just talking about a climate crisis in the far future. We're living it right now. I remember I met a mom a couple years ago before I had kids who told me she was worried about taking her kids out on some days because of the forest fires in BC. It meant that it was unsafe for kids to go outdoors. Fast forward to when I became a parent just a couple years after that, and I literally worry about the same thing. The forest fires we saw a couple years ago meant that many places that didn't see this before saw days where there was such smoke in the air that it was dangerous for kids. We've seen extreme weather, forest fires, heat domes, floods impacting us. We've got to do everything we can to
Thank you,
protect our
Mr.
future.
Singh. That's time. Mr. Poilievre, where does fighting climate change land on your list of priorities when it comes to expanding energy opportunities in this country?
It lands within our priorities of bringing home jobs while bringing down emissions around the world. Look, the reality is that if we push production out of our country to more polluting countries, it actually makes the problem worse. But that has been exactly the Liberal approach. With the anti-development law, C-69,
Gotta keep the pollution
of
Canadian.
15 LNG export plants over the last 10 years, we have seen more of those jobs go abroad. I want to bring them home. My plan will be to approve, for example, natural gas liquefaction and export. If we sent our gas to India, for example, to displace half of their demand for electricity, we could reduce emissions by 2.5 billion tons, which is 3 times the total emissions of Canada. That's the way we bring emissions down and jobs up. It's common sense, and now it's time to bring it home.
Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. The next question is
We
for
need to
Mr.
pollute
Carney.
more, is
How
what
would
he's
your
saying.
government fast-track pipelines and mining projects while also following the Supreme Court decision that requires consent of Indigenous communities?
Well, I think the first thing, and this goes back a bit to where we started, which is recognizing that we are in a crisis. We need to act with maximum force and having a process and a consultation, but a consultation with a purpose, which is to identify those projects, those investments of national interest that are really going to move the dial in terms of growth, jobs, energy security, while being consistent with long-term competitiveness, which necessarily means lower carbon. And so part of that process is ensuring that First Nations, Indigenous peoples, are there from the start. It also includes their ability to participate fully in those projects, and that's why, and I know I can tell, like, you've got to tell on when I've gone on too long, so I'll finish up, which is, that's why we're doubling. Our proposal is to double the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program to $10 billion. What does that actually mean? It means an ability for them to invest equity in those projects and be full partners. Thank you.
My tell is my clock. My clock is at 0, so that's how it goes. Monsieur Blanchet, do you still oppose pipeline construction in Quebec, even though a majority of Quebecers now apparently say they support it?
We will know about that when we have held the debate about that, which has not begun yet. We are just beginning it. First, we are hearing very creative numbers, and we are being fed nonsense. And we will be back to it in a few minutes. But energy, trade, commerce is from south to north or north to south. And it's true in Quebec also. In a little more than 3 years, Donald Trump won't be in office. And there will be not one more pipeline having been built once we get there. So let's be serious, responsible, and we will be back with the numbers. We don't want to pay in Quebec for such monstrosities which will provide us with nothing.
We now move to open debate, and you all will get a chance, or have had a chance, to get the first shot at this. And Monsieur Blanchet, it is your turn to get the first shot. Canada has a substantial supply of critical minerals which are in high demand. Are you in favor of allowing these minerals to be mined?
Of course, it has to be done properly. Quebec has probably the most important clean phosphate reserves in North America. In Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, it is very important. It has to be exploited. This is the best way to use Saguenay as an infrastructure that we need. We have lithium. Everybody needs lithium. Transportation has to be taken from oil to clean energy. This is what we want to be working on. It is part of
there's other ways of
the
getting clean energy
specificities
than
of
mining
specifics
minerals.
of Quebec economy. So we are in favor of that. But we don't want to pay
I love
for
taking
the $30 billion
a country like India, which uses
have been
dirty
spent
fossil
on
fuels,
oil and gas by
and
the
being like,
Liberals
I know how we
last
fix
year.
it. Let's
It's
ship natural gas to
$7
them.
billion from Quebec.
let's
We don't
ship
want to
some
pay
more
for
stuff that
$40 billion which have been spent by the
It still
Liberals
pollutes,
on
but like a
Trans
little
Mountain.
less.
It's $9 billion from Quebec. Those are
opposed to
$16
finding
billion
real
of
clean energy.
of
Canada
which
makes
not
money.
$1 has been spent in Quebec to develop a lot more power and
But they won't
wealth
acknowledge
for
what
Quebecers
should go
with
said
our
is
own
that one of the
money.
best ways to cut down a lot of pollution is to get rid of the militaries.
Enormous opportunity
Those
that
numbers aren't
exists
included in
Quebec,
pollution numbers,
exists in
and
Ontario,
jets and things
exists
of
in
that
the
sort
north of
cause
Canada,
a
really exists
massive
across
amount of
this
pollution.
great nation in terms of critical metals and minerals. We are have one of the
Lockheed
biggest
Martin uses
resources in
hybrids.
this country. And this is, it's not just an enormous economic opportunity, it is a strategic opportunity for Canada. So we have to make a decision, not just to develop it, but how do we develop it and who are our partners for it? Do we become more dependent on the United States, which is what they want? By the way, President Trump this week said he might put a tax on critical metals and minerals, just showing again.
Yeah, but the job is not to-
and so the discussions
to negotiate, not to have tariffs.
if I may
Let's
finish.
let him finish.
Let me finish. So the opportunity includes in Europe and includes in Asia as our partners. Last point. In order to get it done, we'll put in place a first and last mile fund. So these projects are connected to road and rail so they can go quickly to market. And we will have all of the other fast tracking measures in place that I talked about earlier in terms of capital, timing, approvals, so that we can move quickly, we can be stronger at home, better.
Always with the
Mr. Singh.
approval of
Yeah,
Quebec.
I think
Singh has the floor.
we should absolutely take advantage of the fact that we've got incredible amounts of critical minerals in our country. And the way we do that is with any energy project or any project of this nature, make sure it's got the local community buy-in. It creates good jobs in communities.
Yeah,
make sure
let's
we're
just
meeting
keep
all our
on mining
environmental
things
needs.
that there's
and
only
we
a finite
work with
amount
Indigenous
of
partnership. And so I absolutely agree
to
with that.
solve
I want
all
to
of
build
our
on something
energy
Mr. Blanchet
problems, as
mentioned
opposed to
about
making
the
renewable
investments that
sources.
this country has made. What I found
I don't know about
very
y'all, but this
troubling
debate needs more
is that
pharmaceutical ads.
the past number of years, the Liberal government record is one where we have spent the most subsidies
compared to any other country in the G7 on subsidizing oil and gas. These are highly profitable companies.
You voted
I think that's
for
the
it.
wrong thing to do. We fought against it again and again.
No, you voted
and then
for
the
it
Liberals have continued
over
to
and
do
again.
it. And so my question really to Mr. Carney is, will you commit to ending oil and gas subsidies?
Yeah.
We should be using that to invest in people, not giving it to highly profitable oil and gas companies.
Yeah, we talked.
I promised Mr. Polyev the next, we'll come back and get that question answered. Mr. Polyev.
I would like to see those
Well,
subsidies.
Mr. Carney,
go away.
you point out that Donald Trump has a wrong-headed idea of putting a tax on our mines and our industry, and that is wrong. But so do you. You want to apply a massive industrial carbon tax on Canadian mines, Canadian steel mills, Canadian aluminum plants,
You want to let them just pollute as
Canadian
much as they
oil
want?
and gas. And your idea is to double the tax that Trump is applying by hitting them a second time. This will do nothing for the environment. It will actually ship our jobs south of the border,
Mr. Polyev's
just
plan is let them
like
pollute as much as they
President
want.
Trump
Not a good plan.
wants. My plan is to bring that production home here to Canada. For example, I will give a tax credit to low-emitting Canadian industry like Quebec's
I
aluminum,
would like
for
Pierre
example,
to
or
make
British
one
Columbia's
suggestion on how to
natural
fix
gas,
things
so that
without
we not
mentioning
only bring home the
taxes.
production, but we do
Like
it
cutting
below
taxes.
global average levels of emissions.
You
So
translate
we
about
actually
increasing
help the
taxes
environment while
on
bringing
certain
home the jobs for
organizations.
our
What's
people
that? We have to
let him
at the
finish.
same time. That is a sensible, pragmatic approach that puts us in charge of our economic destiny so we can stand up to the Americans from a position of strength for a change.
He
Mr.
wants to let
Carney,
them
we've
pollute
got,
as
hang
much
on a
as they
sec.
want.
I want to give you a chance to speak to Mr. Singh's criticism about oil and gas subsidies and Mr. Polyev's criticism about the industrial carbon tax.
Okay, I'm going to make 3 points. I'll make 4 if you want me to respond to that, but I want to make 3. The first is that I answered this question last night, but I think the puck had already dropped in the Canadians game, so not everyone heard it. Yes, end to oil and gas subsidies.
That's why you need new Democrats.
Secondly,
We'll make it
secondly, I would have done it independently. Secondly, recognizing that the biggest component of that was the cost of building Keystone. Keystone, which is the pipeline which has helped to increase oil and gas oil exports rather by 50% in this country, that is an asset of the people of Canada. We own it. And the question of what to do it. So it's not a subsidy that has disappeared.
some of
it's
the people of
actually an
Canada.
asset of Canada. Let me make a third point, though, in terms
Small
of where the oil and
percentage,
gas
and this
industry,
cost for
particularly
that
the oil industry,
ballooned billions
wants
more
to
than
and
they
needs to go,
expected.
which is to become low carbon in the production and transportation of oil. One of the big projects we need to move forward with is carbon capture and storage, the Pathways project, so that we have oil and gas that is competitive, not just today, 10 years from now and 20 years from now, as the world uses less. We want to have more market share. We need to do
Mr.
that.
Carney, by very
And my
definition-
government will move that.
But by definition, a subsidy isn't when we buy a pipeline. I'm talking about subsidies that go to oil and gas companies.
As the world
well,
uses
independent,
less, you
separate
make
from the country,
more,
oil and
so
gas companies.
they're-
That's what I'm
The
talking
figure you
about.
quoted
It's
last
not worth
night
as much?
included the cost of the pipeline.
Do you want to
There's
address
billions
his
of
point?
dollars
people
we're
are buying
spending, we got to
less?
stop spending.
Sorry,
What?
can we get you to address his point about the industrial carbon
How
tax?
much will the industrial carbon tax add to the price of a car?
So the first thing I want to say is I'm going to address the broader point. Broader point is the entire absence of a climate plan from Mr. Polyev, which, by the way, is going to put our industry and our country at a disadvantage as we're looking for new trading partners. Guess what? Most people want to deepen our partnership in Europe, in Asia. Those countries care about whether or not you've made progress. Second thing is, we're designing a program so that the big polluters pay Canadians at home for making responsible climate choices, for retrofitting their home, getting their emissions down, or improving otherwise. And that is smart climate policy. It's better for the big polluters, and it's better for Canadians.
Pierre Polyev.
Mr. Carney didn't answer my question. I asked how much would an industrial carbon tax on Canadian steel add to the price of a car?
Man
He won't
says he
answer
didn't
because
answer
he
my
knows that it will
questions
be
when
very
he
expensive
refuses
because
to
there's
answer any
lots of
questions
steel
directly either.
in cars. Now, well, Mr. Carney has temporarily
But do you know the answer?
hidden the
You don't know the
carbon
answer
tax.
either. You're just
It's
throwing out random
thousands of
questions.
dollars, thousands of
You're just
dollars.
making it up, though. You don't
extra
know.
costs.
Do know the answer
when
to that
you
question.
add,
He's wrong.
When you add taxes to steel, you raise the price of everything that uses steel. when you add everything, taxes
straw man argument to say, do you know the price?
when
You
you
don't know the
add
price.
when
You
you
don't know the
add
answer.
when you add the carbon tax onto the price of, for example, fertilizer, you increase the price of food. So while Mr. Carney has temporarily hidden the Liberal carbon tax at the pumps while keeping the tax fully in law and planning to raise it after the election, he's also going after a tax on our industry that will ultimately be passed on to you. After a lost Liberal decade of rising costs, we cannot afford a fourth Liberal term. We need a new government that will fully axe the carbon tax, increase the jobs that we have here in Canada, and bring down your cost of living.
We've got just a little over 3 minutes left in this segment. So, Mr. Singh, I want to ask you, do you think climate change is still a priority from Canadians? You're out there. What are you hearing?
Absolutely. You speak to any young person and they think, we're seeing climate crisis in front of us happening right now. You speak to seniors who say, we used to be able to live in our homes without air conditioning, and now we're seeing heat crises in communities that never had worries about extreme weather. We're seeing flooding, we're seeing forest fires like never before. We are living in a climate crisis. So Canadians are absolutely worried about it. As soon as we come into a summer, we start seeing those forest fires again. It's top of mind for Canadians because they're living it, they're seeing it. And I want those Canadians to know, Mr. Carney is not going to end those fossil fuel subsidies unless I'm there to fight back. Mr. Poilievre wants to let big polluters pollute as much as they want, poison our beautiful land, our water, and air. He wants to let them dump into our oceans. I'm going to fight back and defend our environment.
Monsieur Blanchet, on the issue of whether or not people still care about climate change.
I think people should be kept very informed about climate change because we are in a very strange denial situation about climate change, which still exists and is very expensive. And I'm sorry to crash your party, guys, but you are telling fairy tales. Clean oil and gas is a fairy tale. Large-scale carbon sequestration, sorry, I'm French, is a fairy tale. It does not exist. If Alberta wanted to exploit oil and gas and it was not a matter of pollution, I wouldn't mind at all. That's their business. Our own powerhouse in terms of energy in Quebec is clean energy. We are the best place in the world to achieve that. Our market is the northeastern part, Democrat part of United States. We want to keep our money to create wealth in Quebec for Quebecers. Let us be different because
the most
we can
racist
afford
guy on
to be
stage
different.
is actually
I
good
will
on
get
climate.
to you because I said I would. But you've taken a couple of hits here, and I want to give you a chance to respond to some of the things that people on this side of the stage have said.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we do support protecting the environment. We want to ban the dumping of raw sewage into our waters. We want to hold large corporations to high environmental standards to protect our water and air. But we cannot do that by raising taxes and sending jobs overseas, as Mr. Carney is proposing to do. That has been the approach of the last 10 years of the Liberal government. What the biggest companies that develop our resources say is that we need to repeal the Liberal anti-development law C-69, a law Mr. Carney wants to keep in place. They say we need to repeal the industrial carbon tax and get rid of the Liberal energy cap. We need 6 months approvals in order to take back energy security and energy sovereignty.
We can summarize that. He wants to conclude as much as possible.
Hang on. Last word to Mr. Carney in this segment, please.
Thank you very much. You know, I was born in Fort Smith in the Northwest Territories, just north of what the oil sands became. When I was born and when I was growing up in Edmonton, early days, it was a fairy tale,
I was born in Edmonton.
But you know what happened? Canadian ingenuity, Canadian engineers, Canadian governments, both the federal government and the Alberta government got together and converted this.
The worst pollution
if I may,
in the world.
If I may,
the worst
may I finish? May I finish?
10 more seconds to finish, please. Let him finish his point.
That's the opportunity we have. That's the opportunity we have in carbon capture. That's the opportunity we have in small modular reactors. That's the opportunity we have in hydrogen beyond. This country can be a clean energy superpower. My government will help deliver it.
And that is time for this segment. Gentlemen, let us go to our final theme, which is called Leading in a Crisis.
It's like Stephen Miller supporting the Green New Deal.
So do people from Quebec say they're French?
Yeah. Well, they
That's hilarious.
You have to be a francophone. Oh, here we go.
A theme that allows us to explore many different avenues here. So let's get to it. Mr. Carney, you get the first question this time. We haven't balanced a budget in this country in 17 years, and 10 of those years were under your party. You have pledged to get us to a balanced budget in 3 years. Question is, how?
Raise taxes on millionaires and billionaires and corporations.
Put this in the context of leading in a crisis, which is in a crisis, you got to plan for the worst. Worst is that the U.S. actually does want to take us over. Secondly, you got to have a plan to build, and that'll include a fiscal plan, and I will get to that in a second. The third thing is you need to respond in a crisis with overwhelming force. You need to think big. You need to move rapidly. The things we've been discussing today are a subset of what we can and should do as a nation, and we can deliver. And government can play a role, but its role has to be catalytic. And so our approach is that we will slow the rate of spending. It's been growing at 9% a year, operational spending, program spending, away from transfers individual, 9% a year. We'll slow that to 2%. We will focus on a small amount of capital spending by the federal government in order to drive enormous private investment up to $500 billion by 5 years.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Ukraine surely constitutes a crisis.
Cutting back on program
Leading
spending
in a time of crisis.
really
Mr. Poilievre, question for you. If the United States withholds support from Ukraine going forward, do you believe Canada should commit more to assist?
I believe we should continue to support Ukraine. Our party supported donating missiles that the Canadian military was decommissioning. We supported funds and other armaments to back the Ukrainians in the defense of their sovereignty. We also need to rebuild our own Canadian military because the Russians want to make incursions
dying
into
from a
our
Canadian
waters.
missile.
We'll be
That's so
buying
depressing.
4 massive Arctic icebreakers. I'll be opening the first
They have to
Arctic
throw 'em by hand.
base since the Cold War in Canada, CFB Iqaluit. We're going to double the size of the Arctic Rangers and fill the vacancies in our Canadian armed forces.
Yeah, it's about time we build
need a
that wall up
change to
north between
rebuild
Canada
our
and Russia.
military, which has been so disintegrated under the cuts and the mismanagement of the last 10 years. But we can have a change because we have the best soldiers, sailors, and airmen in the world, and they will have full backing from my government if you give me the honor of becoming Prime Minister.
I may come back to
how
that one
many
in the open
veterans
forum because I'm not sure
are
we got an answer about
homeless
Ukraine on
right
that one,
now?
but okay.
And not
Going
receiving
on.
the mental
Mr. Blanchet.
health support that they need.
We'll get more details, perhaps, as we go forward. Mr. Blanchet, given the U.S. trade war, should any talk of a referendum on Quebec independence be put on pause?
That one is easy. It will happen only after the negotiation is over, and that's a good thing. I want to say I support the idea. We must help Ukraine, but we also must help the civilians of Gaza, and we must destroy Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. You know what? I don't want to be the leader of Canada. You will understand that. I don't want to be Prime Minister. But I can offer to be a partner, a responsible partner, a collaborative partner. If Quebec is respected in its differences, in its aluminum industry and lumberwood industry and culture and French language and
culture,
values
French
of
language,
secularity
culture.
of the state, which is the price to be paid in order to have real equality, then if we are respected, we will be a partner, and then even Canada will be stronger in its negotiation against Donald Trump. This is what I am offering. Respect us.
Mr. Singh, I watched
such
last night's debate.
divas.
You seem very eager to talk about health care, so let's talk a little more health care right now. You have made many promises on health care. If a province says to you, we'll take your money for health care, but not your conditions on how to spend it, what do you do?
You mean
We've
like
got to
what's already
negotiate. We
happening?
can't be giving away money without clear conditions. We're in a healthcare crisis right now, and a crisis that is hurting people across this country. People are waiting desperately in line in emergency rooms for hours and hours. Seniors are waiting for years and years to get the care that they need for surgeries that would remove pain or help them deal with mobility issues. We're in a serious crisis. Healthcare workers are burnt out. They are overstretched. And what we're seeing is more and more privatization, and that is hurting our public universal healthcare system. So we've got to fight back against it. We cannot allow our public money to go to a for-profit private clinic lining the pockets of a rich CEO or investors instead of going towards care. We need to make sure that we are investing in solutions where care gets to people, not profiting those at the very top. And so that's my commitment. I'm going to fight to make sure we defend our healthcare against the threats of Americanization and privatization.
Okay, we now go to open forum debate, and perhaps, Mr. Poilievre, you get the first word here.
Healthcare is
This
one
might
of
be
my
a good
major
time
concerns,
to
and that was a
put a
good
little more
answer.
flesh on the bone of what you think Canada could do for Ukraine if the U.S. backs out.
Yes, and my answer is that we should continue to support Ukraine. We don't need to follow the Americans in everything they do. When they're wrong, then we will stand on our own and with other allies. And with respect to Ukraine, that of course includes support with intelligence, equipment, armaments, but it also includes defunding Putin. Right now, Vladimir Putin has a monopoly on the European energy market because, frankly, the Liberals blocked exports of Canadian natural gas off the Atlantic coast. They blocked multiple projects. I would rapidly approve those projects on national security grounds so that we can actually ship Canadian natural gas over to Europe, break European dependence on Putin, defund the war, and turn dollars for dictators back into paychecks for our people.
Mr. Carney,
take over Greenland.
Well, I want to go to the
Dollars for
situation in Ukraine
dictators.
because it's very important. We've been a steadfast, Canada has been a steadfast ally, and Canadians have stepped up, welcoming Ukrainians into their homes and supporting them in other ways.
Mention Gaza?
You know, in my first month as Prime Minister, we joined the coalition of the willing to support Ukraine as the U.S. stepped back. So led by France, the United Kingdom, with Ukraine, number European nations, Australia, ourselves, New Zealand. That's an example of how the new world is going to be. Canada participating in these areas and helping. It also means open trade. Mr. Poilievre voted against free trade agreement with Ukraine. It means aid for Ukraine. Mr. Poilievre wants to cut foreign aid, including for Ukraine, or not. He didn't mention support for aid for Ukraine. We have to stand by them. We have to be there, and this government has been.
Mr. Singh.
New Democrats absolutely support standing with Ukraine and will continue to do that. But I appreciate the opportunity in talking about leadership in crisis, talk about many of the crises that we're up against. And one of the crises we're up against in our country with the threat of Donald Trump, with the threat of the trade war, and with the privatization and Americanization of our healthcare system is the healthcare system. And what we have learned today, you know, Mr. Carney mentioned slowing operation spending. That's a cut to services. He said his plan. He has a plan to balance the operating budget within 3 years. That's going to require massive cuts to spending. We calculated that at $43 billion in cuts. In fact, Rosemary Barton, when he was on the show on February 16th, he said he would cut spending. He said it would be in operations. He defined it as transfers in health. And finally, longtime Liberal and former House Leader Karina Gould said that Mr. Carney's plans would mean massive cuts. That's the only way to achieve it. So, Mr. Carney, do you think it is leadership to cut health care at a time when it is in crisis? I think it is wrong. We can't do that.
We will not cut transfers for health care. We will not cut health care spending, full stop.
But
we'll
Mr.
have
Carney,
a detail, if I may.
Who do we believe, Mr. Carney today, or the one he spoke on Rosemary Barton's show on February 16th, the one that repeated again that he would cut spending? Who do we believe?
If I may, consistently said we'll preserve all transfers to the provinces, including the increases. We will preserve all the transfers to individuals, I won't detail them all, but they're there. So we're looking at addressing an operational spend, which is about $150 billion. We will address that. We will make it more efficient, and we will do it in 3 years, and we'll balance that budget.
Mr. Blanchet.
I am 6 minutes behind Mr. Carney, so I will speak a little bit longer. First, I will support any initiative which will bring Canada aligned with Europe and NATO in order to be stronger and facing new threats.
Good.
I believe that 2% won't be enough. I'm not more in favor of war than anybody else, but we have responsibilities, and our main ally is removing himself from the stage. So we have to step up. We have to do our part. I want to go somewhere else entirely, however. I want to ask Mr. Carney, if we're speaking about leadership here, if Quebec and Canada were to say, you are not being given a majority government, there will be more conservatives than you would like, maybe more New Democrats than you would like, and more people from the bloc than you would like. Will you accept because you don't seem to be very eager about that, to deal with people which basically are more experienced than you are, as legitimate as you are, and would be more representative altogether than you would be being alone in your little kingdom. And I want also to propose to you all guys that 1 week after the election, we all meet, whatever the result, and we start dealing with this crisis together, because this is what people, either they are from Alberta or Quebec or wherever, this is what people expect from us.
Mr. Carney, is that something you could get behind?
I look forward to meeting with everyone. You're welcome to come, Steve, if you'd like.
Bam. Do you agree to do Power Report with me
That's not very
at
respectful.
9 p.m.?
That's not very respectful.
I'm coming.
That's what they do.
Do you agree to do your live stream this weekend?
Yeah.
I'll come to the court. Look,
I still can't get
in a
over how the
crisis,
most
yes,
racist guy on
unity.
stage is good on the
And
environment
you
and
need
the
to
only one to
bring,
mention Gaza so far.
the country along with you. So what I did in the first week was to bring the premiers together, meet with all the Indigenous leaders, and move forward in that context. Now the question is, who's going to lead out of this? Whoever leads out of this, if I may, Mr. Blanchet, merci, thank you. Whoever's going to lead out of this is going to need to work with all the provinces, work with Labour, work with Indigenous leaders, work with all Canadians to bring them forward in a united front. And if I make this last point, one of the things that has happened, which is a credit to those people at home, is that Canadians are coming together. And it's our responsibility to meet the strength of Canadian unity.
Still lagging. I have one small point to make.
Yep.
You will be elected, if you are elected, in the parliament where there are other leaders. I don't know if he called you, or Mr. Poilievre, I don't know if he called you, but before yesterday, you have not spoken to me once, even if I proposed it so many times.
Maybe
but you
because
say
you're a
I
bit of an
speak
ass.
to provinces' leaders. You're not elected in provinces. You are in the parliament where people are to make decisions which might not always suit you, but this is democracy,
Blanchet, I'm
which
going
you
to jump
don't know
in.
too much about.
I'm going
Your
to jump in
response was,
here
"I've
because
spoken to your
I'm
wife."
noticing what the clock is
He gets
saying,
my vote.
and you
I'll
brought
vote
up Gaza
illegally.
earlier, and I think our audience would be interested in hearing your views on the other major international crisis facing the
I just
world
want to
right
get,
now.
Mr. Speaker, before we get that, just to finish up on the healthcare, I just want to speak to healthcare workers right now who are deeply worried about the status of our healthcare
I
system.
do
to
like how he
Canadians
keeps
who
on
believe
bringing
and
up
love our
healthcare.
universal public healthcare system, to patients who are stressed out. If you're worried about which Mr. Carney to believe, the one today or the one who spoke on previous shows and said he would
Mr.
cut,
Singh, I
vote for
think-
New Democrats, and we will fight to defend our healthcare.
I think your
we will never
supporters
let
would really
anyone
like
cut
to
it.
hear what you have to say about this question, and we have less than 5 minutes for it here. What role should Canada play in the other major international crisis in this world, in the Middle East and the war in Gaza? Pierre Poilievre, would you start us off on that? What role can Canada play?
Well, first of all, we must condemn Hamas, and more
I
importantly,
think we've already done that.
the terror sponsors in Tehran who initiated the attacks, the horrific attacks of October 7th. We need to defeat the terrorists so that all the peoples of the world can live in peace.
The terrorists
and
right now
defend the right
are
of
the
yes,
Israelis.
Palestinians to have their
Exactly.
own
And
lives
Tehran did October
free
7th is a
from the
new one, and I'm
oppression of
American.
Hamas dictators and Iranian intervention, while Israel has the ability to live in freedom and peace. But I also want to say, we need to get back to the Canadian tradition, which is that when people come to this country, they leave foreign conflicts behind. The rampaging riots targeting Jewish communities is utterly unacceptable, and it points
There are
to
no
the growing
rampaging
chaos that we
riots
see in
in
our streets
Canada.
after 10 years of incredibly irresponsible liberal policies, of weak borders, of dividing people into groups, of saying one thing to one
The only
group
rampaging
and the
riots that
opposite to
happen in
another,
this country
dividing
are
and
after
conquering.
sporting
We
events.
must end that division and
And done
unite
by
our
white
people
guys.
so that everyone feels safe, and that when we come here,
I was
we
like, do
put
y'all even
our
have that?
foreign
Like,
conflicts behind.
do y'all even have
and we
Philadelphia?
put
That's
Canada
not people.
Mr.
People
Singh,
come
please,
from
go
countries
ahead.
from around the world, and they care deeply about where they come from, and they should be able to do so. That's a part of being in our country, to have that freedom. Your treatment of Palestinians has been frankly disgusting. Your treatment of people who provide care and service for people in Gaza has been disgusting. On top of that, people in Israel and in Palestine deserve to live in peace and security. And Mr. Carney, to date, You've not acknowledged that what's going on in Gaza is now clearly become a genocide. It's important to call things out as they are, and you've not done that.
Mr. Carney.
We need to work, to go to your question, we need to work with our international partners, maximum pressure, maximum encouragement for an immediate ceasefire. That's the first thing.
So many people
Encourage
would
the return
like
of
you
all
so
of
much
the hostages.
better if you just
Resumption
say
of
it.
humanitarian aid. My government put in place $100 million of humanitarian aid, which is ready to go.
Oh, who's
With
preventing
respect
it from
to where
going
this
in?
ultimately goes. Yes, two-state solution, but it has to be a viable and free Palestinian state, living side by side in peace and security with the state of Israel. I will underscore one other thing.
Who's
Mr.
preventing that
Polyev
from
rightly
happening?
mentioned Iran. The Iranian sponsors in this region, we have to be clear-eyed about the fundamental risks of Iran and do everything with our international partners to check it and turn it.
Mr. Blanchet.
If we are to work together, we will have to be consistent. The Jewish community in Quebec and Canada is harassed by a very little minority of radical Islamists. And we don't do so
Wasn't
much.
there a
The law
mosque shot
in
up
Canada
in Quebec?
says that somebody
One of our
may
worst mass
invite
shootings.
people to be violent, to propose genocide against another people if they can be hidden behind a religious motivation. They are in agreement with that, they are in agreement with that, they are in agreement with that. And we say it is a crime to invite people to violence and killing other people. And this is what is being done very often in Canada and Quebec with the approval of the Criminal Code of Canada. And we are saying this has to be changed. We have to change what we do before we want people elsewhere to change what they do.
Last minute in this segment, Mr. Polyev.
This is about crises and leadership. And one crisis we have is in immigration. Because of this Liberal government's commitment to a radical policy called the Century Initiative, which seeks to bring our population up to 100 million people, they have allowed massive overcrowding in our communities. That has caused housing shortages, job shortages,
Don't blame immigration
and
for
healthcare
the fault
shortages.
of your government.
And if I could,
the fact that you did
sorry,
not
I didn't
Bring
interrupt you.
Canada's
I did not
population
interrupt
up to
you. I
100
did not
million
interrupt you.
when?
Don't
It is-
blame.
I do not
We're at
blame
40 million
immigrants.
right now.
Let him finish.
I do not blame immigrants.
Yeah,
I blame the
California
Liberal
is
government,
beating Canada
which brought
alone.
this policy on. And Mr. Carney wants to continue with the Century Initiative. This is crazy. We have to get back to normal levels of immigration, get rid of the fraud in the temporary immigration system, and ensure that the people who come here can arrive in numbers that we can house, employ, and care for. That's how it always was, and that's how we're going to restore
Thank
it.
you, Mr. Polyev. That is our time for this segment. Those are our 5 themes, but we are not done yet. We are entering the next section of our debate tonight, what we're calling the leader's choice, something a little bit different. Each of you will get the chance to ask a question, any question,
This is a
of
long
any other
debate.
leader. You can then debate the answer, and each one will last for 3 minutes. So,
kinda
Mr.
figured it would be
Singh,
done
you
in
have
an
the
hour and a
first
half.
option here. Who do you want to ask your question of?
Mr. Carney.
Go for it.
Mr. Carney, as chair of Brookfield Investments, your company is one of the biggest tax dodgers in Canada. As chair, you approved decisions where Brookfield Investments bought up affordable homes, kicked out the tenants, and jacked up the rates. As Prime Minister, one of the first things you did was a tax cut that helped out mostly millionaires. And you have a plan to cut services for people. Now, I expect that of Mr. Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. That's very much a conservative plan. But my concern is that doesn't sound like what people want for a Liberal leader. So my question to you is, Mr. Carney, whose side are you really on?
Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Singh.
I know they're into the last of it, so
I'm
I
on the
don't
side
think
of
this will be
Canadians. I'm in
2
this
hours
for Canadians.
long
I work for
to
Canadians.
answer somebody in the sandbox.
But your
You
track
know,
record doesn't show that, though.
And thank you so much,
track
Nadia, for
record of
the
public service,
5
for this country.
euros. Super
Go
appreciate it.
back
USA
to,
has
something,
Reaganism ever since Reagan
Mr.
and
Blanchet,
UK
referenced
Thatcherism
earlier,
ever since Thatcher.
which is
Is
how
it also
resulted in
far
crises.
to the
We're
right
in Quebec.
to be
If you ask
Mulrooneyism
anyone in
ever
the
since
finance
Mulroney?
industry, if you ask
Since
anyone in
Mulroney?
government
Probably,
in Quebec
yeah.
in 2008, they'll know that I resolved the biggest crisis.
And bonus
in
points for
Quebec,
you to even
yeah.
knowing that.
Good,
About Mulroney.
60 million
But
of
may
dollars.
I,
This
in
is for these
fairness,
two only.
with Mr.
This is
Singh,
for these two.
Mr. Singh, yes, I have had a long career in the private sector. I'm proud of that career. I've always acted with integrity, and it brings me with experience that I can apply
But no one's
in this
questioning your
moment,
integrity,
moment
sir.
of crisis.
And you certainly have served the country. But the problem is, who have you served? You've served to benefit those at the very top. You jacked up the price of homes for people living in affordable homes as a strategic decision. You dodged taxes. And then your decisions as Prime Minister show you're not prioritizing people, but you're prioritizing big business, billionaires.
So what have we done as a government directly? So we've gone directly to workers using all of our proceeds from the tariffs, committing all of them for workers, the workers most affected in
But the
industries.
employment insurance isn't high enough.
Unlike others who
But the amount,
plan
though,
to
just talk
use
about
them, use them to cut taxes. We are
The amount
focused
of
on.
the EI is not high enough, though. You have to accept that. Right now, it's
there
only
will
covering-
be additional programs. I am fully confident that the next government, whatever government is formed, or certainly if I'm in the next government, we will make additional programs.
But you didn't do that
for
so
those
far,
workers.
though.
Well, I can't.
You could have.
You couldn't, given that we're in an election process.
You could have increased the amount, though.
May I make a core point here, if I may, which is that when you think about workers here today and people watching at home, particularly younger people, there is an enormous opportunity in the trades, in the skilled trades. We are going to build this country in a way that has not been seen before. We are literally talking about hundreds of thousands, not jobs, but careers
But I
in
think
the
people are
trade.
worried, Mr.
And
Carney,
that's
that-
why we're investing in apprenticeships and mid-career.
But I think people are worried, Mr. Carney, if New Democrats aren't there to force Liberals to make sure they remember about people, they will forget.
Gentlemen, that is time. Thank you for that. Monsieur Blanchet, you have the next question. To whom would you like to put it?
Mr. Carney, you avoided quite I would say, skillfully the questions of Mr. Singh. But first, let me correct something. In 2008, not so much by your decision, $10 billion were given to car industry in Ontario, while 60 millions, not billions of dollars, were lent to lumberwood throughout the whole of Canada. I don't believe that's the right way to manage a crisis, since you did not recoup the money from the car industry. Then, you have been the manager of Brookfield. It's supposed to be a green investment fund, but we now know that 50% of the investments of Brookfield is in fossil fuel. It's not so green. You seem to want to support oil and gas industry. That's interesting. You want to support prefab housing, and it's also in the investments of Brookfield, but not in Canada. You want to support nuclear power, smaller reactors, which are more dangerous, by the way, and Brookfield has investments in Westinghouse. You have hidden the money of Brookfield in Bermuda and Cayman Island, $30 billion. Billions of dollars lost for Canada. You are having your taxes being paid by families, workers, elders in Canada and Quebec instead of paying your own taxes. So I want to know, will you, before the election, reveal all the details of your assets, as Mr. Singh has done, as Mr. Poiliev has done, and as I have done? We have a right to know
let him answer.
under those circumstances.
Let's let him answer.
Well, the first thing is, I want to say a word about, I'll say a word about Brookfield. You know, this is a Canadian success story. It is the largest infrastructure investor and developer in the world. It is one of the
Everyone
largest,
loves
if not
Bain
the
Capital.
largest developer of renewable
Just trying to see
power
how long
in the
this
world.
debate is
And who
supposed to be.
benefits from that? That's Canadian pensioners.
If it
That's
bleeds into
Quebec
power
pensioners.
report, don't worry. I have a
That is
contingency
teachers.
for that. So it's all
That
good.
firefighters. It
Wait, you're
is,
going to start the power report late? Like that never
series
happened.
of people, including individuals on this stage, benefit from that. Now, always acted with integrity, served the shareholders of Brookfield when I was there. I have left that. I have followed all the rules well in advance. I have followed all the rules well in advance.
Let's reveal your assets like we all did.
And working for the people of Canada.
What do you own? Why
that is
don't
time,
you tell
gentlemen.
Canadians and
That is
Quebecers
time.
what you own?
Why don't you talk
Mr.
about
Poilievre
maybe
now,
the
who has his
rental
opportunity to ask
properties
the
that
question of
all of
whomever
them
he'd like
have?
here, and that will be
More so
Mr.
Pierre
Carney,
Poilievre.
but if I could
Look him up.
begin by setting the stage. The choice in this election is, after a lost Liberal decade of rising cost and crime and a falling economy under America's thumb, do we want to elect them to a 4th term? Or do we want to change? Change so that you can afford food and homes. Change so that you can be safe on your street, and your change so that your paycheck grows faster than your cost of living. Change with a new Conservative government. Because Mr. Carney is not change. Mr. Carney, in 2020, it was recorded, you began advising Justin Trudeau. It's still on the Liberal Party website today that you are Justin Trudeau's economic advisor. They might want to update your website on that. On June 3rd of 2021, you said that inflation would be a sign of economic progress. And you advised governments, including Justin Trudeau's, your Liberal government, to print money, which led to the worst inflation crisis in a generation. Now, that means that mothers went to bed with empty fridges and empty bank accounts, worried how they'd feed their kids, that seniors worried they'd be evicted from their homes, that young people believed they'd never be able to own a home in the first place.
Hey, we'd love if you made your final
statement. Now, in retrospect,
but
you look back on the Liberal decisions that you advised Justin Trudeau to take.
Everyone's making their
Will you look at the camera in the eye and apologize to the many people who suffered as a result of the inflationary policies that you advised Justin Trudeau to implement?
We could not handle that.
You know, it's... I said earlier, but I'm going to say it again. I know you want to be running against Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau isn't here.
Are you denying you were his economic advisor?
I did not provide any of that advice. I did not provide any of that advice.
It's on the Liberal Party website. Are you accusing your Liberal Party of lying about your role? Because it says today you can go to the Liberal Party website now, and it says that you were Justin Trudeau's economic advisor.
The way you judge someone, in my view, is how they act, what they do when they have responsibility. Twice I was a central bank governor. And in both cases, if I may, in both cases when I was responsible for inflation, inflation was less than 2%. I'll add that when I was here responsible for the Bank of Canada, inflation was less than 2%. Our dollar was at parity. That is the kind of success that I can deliver for this country coming out of this crisis. And what is at stake here?
What is at stake here? What is at stake here? That gave us the worst inflation that we have had in my generation, because the policies that you implemented and those of the MPs that are still in your ministry.
To the
fellow Canadians,
crisis which
the last 10 years has been about the Liberals. The next 10 years should be about you.
And that's time.
They have the same color tie.
Good news is the next question.
Carney's tie is a
I'm
little
going to ask
different.
myself a question.
They have different pins.
Actually, I'm going to ask a question which has been troubling me. And it's troubling me because, you know, we are in a very dangerous and divided world.
Who is it to?
I'm going to ask a question of Mr. Poilievre. Why not? We're in a dangerous and divided world. We talked earlier about the challenges in the Middle East, the threats from Iran, threats from Russia, Russia's aggression in Ukraine. We have the threats from China, which I raised. We have the United States, which is fundamentally changing its security relationships, its commercial relationships. We have all this. And in the context of that, everyone on this stage, Mr. Blanchet, Mr. Singh, myself, we have our top secret security clearance. We have our top secret security clearance. I got mine within 3 weeks. It wasn't hard, but I felt it was important that I had it so I could be in a position to be informed about that dangerous world and take decisions at. And Mr. Poilievre, it is now 950 days, if my numbers are right, since you've had the opportunity to get your top secret security clearance, and you've refused. Why?
Well, first of all, I have got my security clearance when I was a minister. I got top secret clearance at the time, so there's no problem getting that.
Then why don't you do it?
The government made this recent offer, they said that if I got the secret security clearance briefings, that I would be gagged under the security law, and I could be prosecuted if I spoke freely about matters of foreign interference. Now, given that Canada has experienced Chinese interference by Beijing, the government of China, in 2 consecutive elections, I
He's
needed to do my
gagged.
job to speak freely
Fellas,
without fear of
is
prosecution.
it gay to get security
and that was not
clearance?
something I would be allowed to do. Even
Security
Thomas
for what?
Mulcair, the former leader of the NDP, said that when he
No.
was the leader of the
Host leader scrums are
opposition,
canceled
he
due to
never
security
would have accepted
concerns.
the kind of gag order that your government
The
and Mr.
gay
Trudeau's
order.
government was attempting to impose on me. And it's good that I'd made that decision because it has allowed me
They're
to
trying
speak
to
freely
impose
about things
gayness
like
on
the
you.
case where one of your candidates, sir, actually said that he wanted to send a political opponent to China under a bounty threatening his life or imprisonment, and you refused to get rid of him. Now, it might have something to do with the fact that you went to China not long ago to get a $250 million loan for your company, but the reality is you refused to stand up for a Canadian who was being threatened by a foreign government, and I was able to speak freely on that matter because I refused the gag order that the Liberal government attempted to impose on me.
Well, there's a
He
couple
refused the
interesting
gay
things.
order.
I think people at home have seen a robust debate here,
That
and
time
it's
he
been a robust
enunciated.
campaign, and
Gag.
it has not stopped Mr. Blanchet or Mr.
The thing
Singh
he
at times
does
during his
around
campaign
gay.
by making challenges with respect to these issues. So one can address it. I will observe, as someone with a top secret security clearance, that China is not the only country that is accused of foreign interference, and
gentlemen, that is
we'll
time
leave
for
it
this
at that.
segment. That's our time. Now, closing statements are still a few minutes down the road, so we have a little bit of time for
guess
some
this is
quick
2
hit
hours long.
Q&As for each of you right now. Short questions, 45 seconds, please, on the answers, and we're going to go left to right as I
think
look
there
at you
should
right
be a
now.
gay
Ms.
order
Poilievre,
coming
the
in
first
from the
question.
federal government.
To the best of my knowledge, you have not offered a hard timeline, as the other parties have, to meet Canada's NATO commitment of 2% spending on defence. When would you hit that target?
My aim will be to 2030. That said, when we renegotiate our trade deal with the U.S., I know it's their priority to see us increase our military budget. One of the things I will say to the Americans is the more free trade, tariff-free free trade we have, the faster we can rebuild our military in Canada and reassert our sovereignty. And we will use that money to have heavy icebreakers in the north, Poseidon aircraft, fighter jets, a new base in the north, double the Arctic Rangers, fill the vacancies in the
I
armed
will
forces,
give in to
and
Donald
rebuild
Trump
the warrior spirit that
while
characterized
pretending to
our
say that
military
fighting Donald Trump
since
is
the
about
birth
most
of our
important.
country.
Mm-hmm.
We will
Bitch
rebuild
made.
our forces, and we will stand behind
Vichy
our
mad.
veterans.
Thank you, Mr.
However you say
Poilievre.
that in
Ms. Carney, your
Quebecois.
question, you have cut both the consumer carbon tax and the capital gains tax increase that you inherited from your predecessor. Is that an admission that the Liberals made life less affordable for Canadians?
I think let me give you the rationale behind both of those changes. First, with respect to the consumer carbon
I
tax.
used to get a nice rebate check from that.
In effect,
that
it'd
I'm not going to
become
get anymore.
too divisive for Canadians. Canadians received rebates. On the whole, they received more than the tax actually was. But some had represented that it was a tax without a rebate. It became divisive. It didn't serve its purpose. It made a relatively modest contribution to overall climate goals. I got rid of it. First act made Canadians whole. Secondly, but with respect to the capital gains tax, it's come up again, I'll be quick.
But it was a very smart
This is a
move.
fundamental issue. We need to build this country. Builders, innovators, entrepreneurs need to be rewarded. That's why I brought it back.
And that's time. Thank you. Mr. Singh, would you change the existing cap on immigration?
I've said that the level of immigration, first of all, we need immigration. It's fundamentally important to our country. And we speak to any small business owner, you speak to people here in Quebec, you speak to farmers. It's fundamentally important. A couple things, though, we know we need to be able to set the amount of folks that we welcome to our country at a level that it meets our needs. So I would ensure that we've got an expert panel that makes that determination based on our economic needs. We also know that we should be very clear that the lack of investment from Liberals and Conservatives resulted in the fact that we have a shortage in housing. That's something that we've got to fix. I should also point out that if you are worried about the cuts being proposed by Liberals and Conservatives, vote for New Democrats. We'll fight back to protect Canadians and make sure that we've got the right immigration levels.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. That's time. Mr. Blanchet, Quebec, I believe,
can actually answer
is
the
now the only
question.
province
Shocking.
with a carbon tax. Do you think that's fair?
It's not entirely true. It's not a tax. What Quebec has is a system by which we invite big emission companies, I don't know how to translate that, to
Don't know what you
reduce their
Anglophones
emissions.
say.
If they do not, then they have to pay it goes into a fund which is invested then in reducing emissions. Our partner is California, which makes this a huge deal about reducing emissions. This is what we do. This is to be compared to what Europe does. And by the way, Europe would impose tariffs on Canadian oil if it ever got there.
Don't rope us into
We're quite
this
proud
now.
of that. And we have to be responsible because this is much less expensive than doing nothing to fight climate change.
That's time. We're going to do another set of quick hits here, left to right again, and 30 seconds this time. Monsieur Poilievre, you've previously promised to defund the CBC as one of your very first acts as Prime Minister. Is that still the plan?
Yes, CBC will continue to operate as a self-funded, Canadian-owned and controlled non-for-profit that raises money like other media organizations through sponsorships, subscriptions, advertising, licensing fees, and countless other things that will ensure Canadians who still want to listen and view its content will be able to do so. And at the same time, we'll allow freedom of the press so that everybody has their voice heard and they can make their own decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. The next question to you, 30 seconds. Would you remove some of Canada's legal tax avoidance loopholes that companies that you have worked for have used?
Look, I think that what we need to do is undertake a comprehensive review of our corporate tax system and do that on the basis of the right principles. We've got to have fairness, transparency, sustainability, and competitiveness. So we need a tax system, a corporate tax system, including being part of a international minimum corporate tax through the OECD.
And that is time. Mr. Singh, the question for you is, if you hold the balance of power after this election is over, what would your price be to support another party?
We've laid out our priorities. We want to make sure we bring down the cost of groceries, build homes that people can afford. I can also tell you that we would defend CBC, unlike Mr. Poilievre, who wants to cut it, and we would close tax loopholes and offshore tax havens, even though Mr. Carney didn't respond to that, and selling stocks and shares to make profits and then having less taxes on that is not hard work. And so those aren't the job creators. The people who are job creators are the hardworking men and women that contribute to our economy.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Monsieur Blanchet, kind of the same question. If you hold the balance of power in the next minority parliament, if it is that, what would be the price of your support?
Respect for Quebec. That's quite easy. I don't want to go against what Canada wants to do for itself, but I don't
Just
want
treat
Canada
me
to
like a
impose
delicate
an economic
snowflake.
vision or a multiculturalist vision on Quebec, which is different in terms of language and values and secularity and equality between people. So I want to be a partner, and if Quebec is respected, Canada has nothing to fear from the bloc because we vote for what is good for Quebec. It only has to be good for Quebec.
Thank you, Monsieur Blanchet. Now, we have one last question for each of you. We'll go right to left this time as I look at you. Bit of an offbeat question. Mr. Blanchet, what is your biggest regret during this campaign?
That's a very good question. I'm not very fond of regrets, I would say, but we should have started sooner to see that we had to create the environment for a deal in which Quebec and Canada would be, one bigger than the other, but partners to be stronger in front of Mr. Trump and showing that maybe nobody here is the partner to let go alone without being surveyed or controlled or supervised by a Quebec voice.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchet. Same question, Mr. Singh. Your biggest regret of this campaign?
That's
Not
actually
being able to meet as many people as I would love to have. It's a short campaign, and so I can't
Opposed
get
to like
to as
in
many
the Ontario
communities as I
election
wanted
where
to.
it was like, what would you
I
make
think
your
one of the
opponent
honors
if
of
they
my
came
job
over
is to
for
be able to
dinner?
meet people and to hear their stories, and then to take their stories and concerns and bring them to Ottawa and to fight for those people. And so I want you to know, even if I haven't made it to your community, I'm going to fight like hell to make sure that you're represented, that we never let any government cut our health care, that we defend the values that we care so deeply about. We make my life more affordable. That's my commitment to you. Even if I didn't get to see you, that's my commitment.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Mr. Carney, same question. Biggest regret of the campaign?
To be honest, it's the same answer. This is an astonishing country. It is an amazing country. And the opportunity and the responsibility that comes with it of being with Canadians, hearing their stories, their challenges, drawing strength and ideas from them, and working to be part of the
Nobody
solution
has mentioned anything
is the
about
greatest
people
honor
struggling with
of my life.
disabilities.
But the regret is that it is also a big country, and it is a short period of time.
Mr. Poilievre, last word to you.
I actually agree with these two gentlemen. I had a rule that at all my rallies, even when they're really big, I would stand in front of a flag and greet every single person.
My big
and
rallies
hear
in
their
front of the
stories
flag.
and learn their struggles. And that was always touching to me, that they would put their faith in me or in any of us.
Yeah.
But we've been in such a rush because we have to get off to the next event, so we haven't been able to stop and do that. And I want you to know out there, I haven't forgot about you. Thank you.
He looks like he's trying to make
Thank
himself
you, Mr.
cry for the
Poilievre.
moment.
It is time now for closing statements, and prior to the debate, you drew lots as to which order we would go in. And Mr. Singh, you get the first word on a closing statement.
Certainly, thank you. Because you voted for New Democrats, we were able to build this country that we love. Universal health care and pensions, because you voted for us. Because you voted for New Democrats, we were able to fight to bring in dental care, pharmacare, and childcare. Because you voted for us, because you supported us. You have the power with your vote to send more New Democrats to Ottawa, to continue that fight, to make sure that no government cuts the things that we hold dear, like our health care, to ensure that we can do everything possible to make life more affordable by making it more affordable to buy your groceries and to get a home. I'm asking for your support in this election so that I can continue to fight to defend the things that make Canada, Canada, the things that we hold dear, the things that make us proud to be Canadian.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Mr. Carty.
We are facing the biggest crisis of our lifetimes. Donald Trump is trying to fundamentally change the world economy, the trading system. But really what he's trying to do to Canada, he's trying to break us so the U.S. can own us. They want our land, they want our resources, they want our water, they want our country. We're all going to stand up against Donald Trump.
I saw that ban.
I'm ready. I've managed crises over the years. I've built strong economies. We will fight back with counter tariffs. We will protect our workers and those businesses, and we will build the strongest economy. We will build Canada strong. I'm asking for your support, the honor of doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Monsieur Blanchet.
For 260 years and a little bit more, les Français, devenus des Canadiens, devenus des Canadiens français, devenus des Québécois, you have tried to have them become Canadians like all Canadians. But to no avail, we are different. So let's be economic partners. Let's have a voice chosen by and for Quebecers, an ally for Canadians as equals in front of Mr. Trump.
Monsieur Poilievre.
Just
You're
want
not
to say,
in Canada.
as leader
Could
of
someone
the
start where I
opposition,
began and
the
get
Quebec,
to the stage?
that
I was
we are
born to a
Canadians.
single mother and adopted by school teachers who raised me to believe in the incredible Canadian promise that anyone who worked hard could do anything. That promise feels broken today. Many of you worried about paying your bills, feeding your families, or ever even owning a home. You're worried your kids are in danger. But I'm here to say it doesn't have to be this way. With change, we can restore the Canadian promise so that hard work gets you a beautiful house on a safe street under a proud flag. We can do it with hope for a change.
Gentlemen,
Hope
thank
for
you for a
change.
very
Where have I
spirited
heard
debate
that
tonight.
before?
2 quick points before we go. Number one of you celebrated your 60th birthday yesterday on this stage. Yves-François Blanchet, bon anniversaire.
Bon anniversaire.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Secondly, you'll notice we didn't have to change the time of this debate because the Leafs already clinched the Atlantic Division title, and therefore we didn't need to move the debate to accommodate a hockey game. I'm getting back at my colleague who was in this position last night, and okay, go Habs go, that's fine. With that, we're done. Thank you, leaders, for being here tonight. We are just 11 days from Election Day, April 20th.
Okay, so do you guys just want to say a quick thing before we switch over to the power report? I will attempt to change screens and make it look decent.
We can take like a good. I mean, Bam's feeling extra Canadian and polite, so he wasn't really doing a lot of play-by-play interruptions. So I definitely want him to get his thoughts in. This is well within, world news that we do on Power Report, and I'm already streaming on both channels anyways, so we can take a good 10 or 15 minutes on this, give it a proper how we would do debates down south, I guess, for your audience. And yeah, we can take a good I think 10, 15 minutes to kind of give us a proper recap. But Sandy, because you were the resident Canadian on your show, I
Yes.
think you should give kind of a take of like how that was, and then bam, go ahead. As I'm directing your show.
Yeah, as you're directing my show. I think the issue I have with debates these days is nothing said was going to change anyone's mind. So if you were going to vote conservative, you're still going to vote conservative. If you were going to vote liberal, you're going to vote liberal. And how, you know, again, they shied away from talking about Gaza, which is a huge issue for a lot of people. They talked about climate, but they didn't really talk about solutions for climate. Just other than, you know, we're going to make the energy we produce cleaner. It's so frustrating. Like the debate format for me,
Clean phosphorus.
Yeah, the debate format for me is somebody who's autistic would just drive me absolutely insane. Like I do like having a moderator, but like these quick answers, the 30 seconds, like we need to be having more nuanced conversations, detailed conversations, and this is one of the rare times where Canadians are actually paying attention to what the politicians are saying, because normally they don't. Like a lot more will tune into a debate than they will just a regular press conference. And I feel like none of them made a decent case other than Jugmeat about healthcare, which, you know, I'm kind of biased towards because healthcare is a huge issue for me on my channel. But no minds were changed from this debate. And other than, you know, Yves François Blanchet making it really clear that as far as he's concerned, if you're a Quebecois, you are not Canadian.
Yeah, apparently you're French. I mean, honestly,
Francophone.
right. I wonder if the black people in Quebec call themselves French. I doubt it. And I wonder if the French call the people in Quebec French. I doubt it.
Depends. There's a large Haitian population in Quebec
Yeah.
because of French.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure they call themselves nation. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like I'm looking at it like who on the panel actually has a chance. I mean, I'm sure Mark Carney does, but like who are the other people that you know actually have a shot at winning?
You see, that's a little. When it comes to Yves François Blanchet, he will never stand a chance of winning because
Right.
the party only has seats within Quebec and maybe 2 or 3 outside in some French areas in Ontario and New Brunswick. So he will never be prime minister. That party will never be in the majority. However, they have been the official opposition before because Quebec has the second highest numbers of seats to Ontario based on population. But what's been happening with the NDP has been just so disappointing because they are a federal party, candidates in all the ridings, and yet they're going to be lucky to maintain party status. As much as I would love the NDP to, you know, win with a raging majority and stuff, they'll be lucky to maintain party status. And they've just been completely mismanaged over the past decade. Like Jack Layton had a good chance of getting the NDP into power, but he also did that by moving away from a lot of the socialist roots. Like he was just a very likable person, and considering you probably have no clue who I'm talking about, he was the leader of the NDP, but he passed away from cancer at a young age. So if he had had like 1 or 2 more terms, there's a good chance the NDP would have gotten into power in this country. But
The NDP is in power. The NDP is in power in BC, right?
Provincially, yeah. But provincial NDP and federal NDP are 2 different parties. So even though, like, here we have the Conservatives in charge of Ontario, they've actually been outspoken against the Conservatives federally because of how they view the Conservatives as mismanaging their campaign and dropping so drastically in the polls that I don't care about. So they've actually called out their own party. So while there's often a lot of working together, they are very different parties with their own, what's the word? Not agendas, but their own,
Maybe policies or
yeah, there's a term for it.
Run incentives, honestly, it sounds like.
They have their own, it's something like agenda, but that's not the word that I want. Somebody get it in the sandbox. Read my mind. Their own, it bugs me when I can't remember those words. But yeah, and so the NDP, they stand no chance of winning, as much as, yes, I would like them to win. So the race is between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre. How that's going to turn out, I have no idea, because polls are silly, and they don't do, they're just educated guesses, and we're in such bubbles here that of course we see it like, oh, Mark Carney is definitely in the lead, but we're not seeing things outside of our algorithms. So we have no idea realistically how well he's doing compared to just the general population. Because I've been seeing a fair bit of conservative signs out of my walks, even though this is a liberal stronghold. So it's something like platforms, Philip Blair, but not quite. I think it begins with an O.
Objectives?
No. It's
Au revoir?
No. Gay?
Definitely gay.
Yeah, that was definitely the play of the game right there.
It's something like principles. Oh my God, it's going to bug me so much, because when I had a candidate on from the provincial election, she mentioned what it was. And it's really bugging me.
I wish I definitely saw that interview you did, because it was really good, but I don't remember the transcript off of my brain. I'm just not that tight. But I think one thing, to the point that what you were just saying, like, there is, again, I'm coming at this from one of the most ignorant places possible. But I can at least draw parallels between the way that Carney was presenting himself, which, like, the first thing I said, and even like in various different ways, the people on the debate stage with him and the moderators seemed to be like, yeah, dude, you're running your gums like way too much. Like, you're not getting to the point, you're going to these long diatribes, which, first of all, Ken Folk. Second of all, like, I really wonder how it's being received in the public. Like, the big backlash that, it doesn't make a lot of sense. American voters don't make a lot of sense. But the big backlash against Kamala Harris was definitely in part a backlash to Biden and the Democratic Party more broadly, because unlike what you're kind of describing, to where Carney's willing to step to a little bit in different forms of policy than Trudeau, it still is very easy to paint the two together, and that's what you saw Poilievre, whatever, trying to do the same.
Poilievre. Just call him PP.
PP. Yeah, like the same sort of thing that he was doing relatively successfully at certain points, which was tying the two liberal Democrats together. It worked in the short term. Now, it's very, even for me, not following these polls carefully, it's very easy to see through Pierre's sort of like game of trying to be like, I'm going to be strong against Donald Trump, when you can tell, like, he's doing it very begrudgingly. You can definitely tell that a couple months ago he was like a Cenk Uygur conservative, I guess, in Canada, going like, hey, well, I guess Trump's cooking down there, I guess he's got some points, let's cook with that, right? I promise Power Report's not going to be about that. But I just definitely see that this is a I see this dynamic, and it makes me very concerned, because I'm not one to necessarily trust polling. I just want to like get my head in the game and understand like how far down Jagmeet and the French nationalists were compared to the other two, and seeing that, like, I had messaged Sandy in a very depressed state shortly after the presidential election in America, either shortly before or shortly after, just taking a glance look at Canadian politics and being like, oh, the Conservatives are about to sweep in y'all's next election, huh? And I'm pretty sure, Sandy, you agree, not to put you on blast. Now it's a lot closer because of a lot of the Trump stuff, and the anti-Trump stuff is a great foil for the Liberals. But you're seeing the same problem with the Liberals are not really that inspiring on the Canadian side. And so I all of the conditions are ripe for the sort of like upset swing that we saw
Yeah.
in America. It just sort of depends on like, how many steps ahead is the Canadian public more broadly thinking about this? Because yeah, we maybe they could see, oh, well, this worked on the average American participating voter. Maybe it doesn't work on the average Canadian voter, but I'm not very confident in that. And that's where I defer to Sandy and
Yeah.
your knowledge.
So yeah, after the American election and stuff, everything was looking like the Conservatives were going to sweep up here too. And I was saying at the time, unless there's a drastic change in both the NDP and the Liberal Party, the Conservatives are going to win. So there was a drastic change in the Liberal Party. And even then, I said it wouldn't necessarily guarantee a win from the Liberals. It would just increase their chances. And what I'm worried about right now is that Mark Carney is our Kamala Harris, as in when she first got into power, or into the role as candidate, there was this big sigh of relief, like, oh,
A
okay.
honeymoon, halo effect, yeah.
There was just this sigh of the relief, like, okay, now we're going to be fine, we're going to win it and stuff. And everyone got distracted and everyone got this like false sense of enthusiasm that she was going to win when she was pretty much just the same as Biden. Like there was a lot of people I saw online that were just, no, she stands a chance. She stands a chance. And then, yeah, Trump still comes in and he still wins. And I'm worried that that same thing has happened with Mark Carney, where people are like, oh, finally we have somebody competent who speaks well, who's smart and all this sort of stuff. And he's just such a relief. The biggest difference is he's a white man. Also, what Trump has been doing has been driving Canadian nationalism to a point where, the Conservatives tied themselves to Donald Trump, and he's a really bad brand right now. So if Donald Trump had not done his trade war, his tariff attack on Canada, then I would say the Conservatives would still win. But now it's going to be potentially a lot closer. I don't know. Like, that's the thing. There's just no guarantee. You're circling a globe.
I'm circling the 51st state. No, yeah, no. I think that's the X factor really fast, is that how much do Canadians hate what's going on with America, and who do they think is going to be the foil to that doesn't completely roll over, while also not disrupting the white Canadian status quo. Bam, you're going to say something.
Yeah, well, like I wonder between Polyev and Carney, do you, Sandy, aside from Polyev hypothetically just handing over Canada to America, but if you want, no, I'm joking. But aside from that, do you think Polyev-led Canada and a Mark Carney-led Canada would be very different?
Yes. Absolutely. I was mentioning it before, but with Mark Carney, because as I say, an election, it's what we do in between elections that really matter. Like right now, our choices are between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre, but the fight happens once the election is over, and we need to push the government to do what we needed to do. With Mark Carney, we're going to be fighting to improve the lives of Canadians. With Pierre Poilievre, we're going to be fighting to maintain our rights, because he's looking to actively strip them away with the notwithstanding clause. It's going to start with bail reform, but as a lot of people say, it's like that's where he says it's going to start. But once you open up that door, you never know where it's going to end. And it's not just that. It's going to be, he wants to defund a lot of the programs. He wants to get rid of the CBC. He's probably going to get rid of that milquetoast dental care and pharmacare that we got, the child care. He's going to defund social programs. Our health care is going to be massively privatized. So all these things that we want will be at threat if he gets into power. And so to all the people out there that keep on saying, well, the liberals offer me nothing, so I'm not going to go out and vote, I say bullshit to that. What they do offer is to, at least at the bare minimum, is to maintain the status quo, whereas Pierre Poilievre will destroy it and make it a lot worse. And I'd much rather maintain the status quo, as shitty as it is, to try to fight that than to be struggling as to whether or not I know that my passport will be able to maintain my gender marker. Because that is also something Pierre Poilievre will probably try to get rid of, the fact that I'm non-binary. Because he's already, done the same rhetoric around, I've only ever heard of 2 genders type thing. Like, our rights, queer folks will be in danger. Immigrants will be in danger. People of color, indigenous peoples, oh my God, they will suffer so bad under him. Like, he has been horrifically racist towards indigenous peoples. So there's just so many things that are also ingrained in the policy that he's trying to get through that will just actively make our lives worse. Whereas with Mark Carney, again, at a bare minimum, he's going to maintain status quo. And it's not great. And, there will be some inflation, so chances are the cost of living will get slightly worse, all of that sort of stuff. But the main status quo will be maintained. And so that is a much better platform to be fighting than to be, having an anchor thrown on our ankles and trying to fight to just maintain breath.
Sandy, I just want to say this. You make a lot more sense than a lot of the leftists down here. Let me tell you, because this is just common sense. And what you're saying is, like, I feel like a lot of the leftists here feel like they're selling out by saying that. Like, why don't we not make it worse, guys?
Well,
But for whatever reason, I felt like, you can't hardly get a leftist to say that down here. But I really appreciate you saying that.
Well, I just look at the Ontario election, which affects me so personally because all the other parties pledged to double the rates of ODSP, which is our disability support, which we are, well below the poverty line. The Conservatives are only going to, keep it with inflation. There are going to be people who are going to die by the next election that had any other party been in power would be alive because of that. The housing crisis here in Ontario has just 80,000 people were in encampments last year. That's like, I did the math on it. That would have been like the 18th, 17th largest population center in this province if they were all counted as one. The amount of social murder Doug Ford is responsible for is only going to increase and get worse. So there's going to be people who are dead because some people decided to stay at home because the parties weren't offering them anything. So I damn well do vote shame when it comes to that. And with Pierre Poilievre, we're looking at a lot of the same things when it comes to our healthcare, when he wants to defund supervised consumption sites, what he plans on doing with crime and bail and all that sort of stuff, while decreasing the quality of life of people. The amount of deaths of despair will increase, what he plans on doing to Indigenous peoples, and they're, undermining them in every chance he gets. Everything will get a lot worse under him, and people will die because of it. But, with Mark Carney, there will still be social murder, but it'll be a lot less.
I feel like I also read something recently. I don't know if I ended up reading it or just saw the headline, but about I mean, I don't even know what's the correct term because it was like a little bit ago when I saw this, but about assisted death in Canada, like the rates being very high and it being problematic.
This is something that I desperately want to do more in-depth stream on, but on a larger platform where it can get out to more people, because the amount of misconceptions around the MAID program, medical assistance in dying, and how nuanced that conversation is, because you might hear something like, 5% of deaths in Canada were from this program. Yes, and the overwhelming majority of them were people with cancer in their 70s, and they shortened their lives by about 2 months. Right. It's dying with dignity. I support that, but there have absolutely been cases of people who have turned to that because they couldn't get the supports they needed, like a home to live in with no chemicals, in-home care, all of that. Plus, they're also planning on including people whose sole condition is mental health. So to add that to MAID before including it in the overall Health Act is criminal to me. So it is a very nuanced conversation. It's not, but you still have to go through a process. You can't just apply for it and it be granted. You need 2 doctors to sign off. It's 3 months, or depending, if you're like terminal with cancer type thing. But yes, people can apply for MAID whose death is not in the foreseeable future because of disabilities and life has just become unbearable type thing. And there have been people who have turned to it because they could not get the supports they need. But it's nowhere near as extreme as, what a lot of the people out there try to paint it as, which I find really devalues the people who have had to turn to it, for that reason. Right. And there are, again, the vast majority of people, I think the average age is like 78 or something like that who have used it. Because there are actual stats and facts, and they will tell you how many people in track 1 used it, how many people in track 2. So track 2 is the people with disabilities. Track 1 is like terminal illness. So these stats and facts do exist, but a lot of people just hear, 5% of deaths are from this. And it's like, yeah, and I would agree with the vast majority of why people turn to it in that case. So it's a very, very nuanced conversation that needs more discussion. But then that also just goes into talking about disabilities in general and how that's never talked about, because nobody on that stage mentioned anything about disabilities and the struggles that people have with disabilities. It's always about like, we're going to have all these trade jobs and we're going to help the workers and all that sort of stuff, but never how they're going to support people with disabilities with maybe higher health care costs. And the people with the least suffer the most. And even when it comes to something as simple as climate change, it's the people who can't run are the people who die. When you look at a forest fire or a flood and things of that sort, or the people with low income who quite often disproportionately live with disabilities who can't afford the air conditioner that die in the heat dome. Hundreds of people died in BC under that heat dome. The vast majority of them, people with poverty and disabilities. Because if you have a disability that gets inflamed by the heat and you have nowhere to go, you're going to die. And that gets dismissed so much. And then they had the disability tax benefit, which was just a slap across the face of like, the federal government has finally stepped up and done something. They've done nothing. For some people who live with disabilities, they're going to get $200 extra a month. I get $1,400 a month from disability. Average rent in this area for a 1-bedroom apartment is about $1,600. So
that, no, yeah, just like, I guess like my last question, Bam, if you had like a last one after this, feel free to go ahead. But like, I think, first of all, we're dual streaming on my stream. So if you, for some reason, are watching on my stream,
if Dan starts getting really bossy on my show.
No. I meant to say that if for some reason you are watching, because I stream on Twitter, the loveliest site on the internet, and YouTube and Twitch. If for some reason you don't know who SandeeLovas, Left of the Box is, and all of Sandy's great coverage on disability rights and healthcare and just like Canadian politics in general, youtube.com/Left of the Box. Please check Sandy out. I think the thing that I was thinking about a lot was, especially in the wake of, Bam's like really astute comments, I was about to say something very similar about like us, Bam and I, kind of like reflecting on what the American left and the online American left, what role it has in this very fascistic moment that we're experiencing in the United States. It's really at least grounded for me what the place is for the left, like in one, accepting that it is for now, due to a lot of systemic issues, because it's definitely not the policies, but a lot of systemic issues, are in the minority as far as representation in government. Um, what is the role of the left? And so I see Jagmeet on stage there, and I think it's good and it makes sense that he went on the attack for someone like Carney, right? Also, he's basically the Jill Stein of Canada right now when it comes to what thing, right? Like, his 8% could be, if sorry to bring in polls on this, but if I'm gonna be like American poll brain here, his 8% could potentially be considered what Americans would say as a spoiler candidate for Pierre if he wins, right? So I think like, is there a role for and I don't fully believe this. I'm just kind of playing like
Mhm.
dumbass American slash devil's advocate here. But not, devil's advocate just for the point, but kind of just like for my own understanding and maybe for the understanding of an American audience. But like, do you think the value for Jagmeet is to like ride this balance between, well, hey, here's how much, further populist left you could go and actually appeal to more people and excite more people about a shared mission that in a parliamentary system, the NDP and the Liberal Democrats could like possibly unite on, versus do you think it helps for him to play that, I hate to use the term, but like spoiler row or spoiler role where he is, hitting on as far as he's willing to go, which at least in that debate, I'm like, not far enough, boss. Especially if you're like going for broke, like you can go so much harder on that stage and at least like set yourself up for something like an I told you so tour, like Bernie and AOC and Maxwell Frost are doing right now.
Mhm.
But to me, it's like you either go hard in the paint on the things you stand on, or you strategically go, I'm going to lift this person up and then try to cash in that benefit once, the dust settles in that magical 1 week meeting that all of the leaders of the parties are going to do anyways.
Mhm.
Dumbest question ever. So I think like, what do you think is the best strategy, especially from the, because you don't like polls. I assume that because you don't like polls, you have a better sense of like what is on the ground in what, working class, non-loving to work factory jobs Canadians really feel about things. Yeah, what do you think is the better strategy for the NDP on the national
Mhm.
level? And do you think that Jagmeet is meeting that moment? And if not, are there any politicians that we should be looking out for who might succeed Jagmeet with a little bit a better energy?
Yeah. So here they often talk about vote splitting, and that can be an issue sometimes, but it's not a toggle so much between the NDP and the Conservatives versus the Liberals, and the Conservatives usually toggle more between each other. Um, and if they get more votes and the Liberals are in a minority position, then they actually have power to push through the milquetoast dental care and pharmacare we have. And I really wish that they would quit calling it just that, because the dental care is very, means tested restricted. The pharmacare was for birth control and diabetic medication. And that's it. Um, so it was very, very limited. His political instinct, Jagmeet Singh's political instinct is shit. He has not been good. When he first came onto the stage, there was a lot of hope around him. He had an energy about him. I've met him. He's an amazing person. He definitely exudes that kind of like, yeah, I can see it. Like he's definitely a good leader and stuff. But in the past 5 years, I don't know, at least 4 years, everything he's been doing has just been a misstep. And right now, the NDP is what the Liberals claim to be. They're not pushing more towards that. Like they have a very socialist foundation when they were started by Tommy Douglas. Like it's a very socialist. You look at their mandates, that was the word I was looking for earlier. Very socialist in nature, and Jagmeet is going so far from that. And in fact, he's even mimicking policies from the Conservatives at times. And he's not going anywhere near far enough to energize people. Like we don't have that AOC or that Bernie Sanders here right now. After this election is done, they'll be lucky to maintain party status. He needs to step down. He should have stepped down before. he is not the person to meet the moment. And it's not just him, but it's the whole upper management of the NDP have to go. Because what they do is they block out people who are more progressive, who are more socialist in nature from even being able to run for the party. Because you have to go through a vetting process. You can't just run on a ticket as an NDP. You have to actually get approved by them. And so they make sure that the people like me, who have the tendency to speak their mind and have a sense of humor, which is a strike against you, don't get to represent the NDP. And so as they start filtering out the more radical, the more progressive people to have, you know, more liberal light candidates, they parachute candidates in to certain ridings. I can speak from my experience with this, you know. So they're really driving the NDP to be something that that the base doesn't want, but they override their base. And then even if you look at the convention and people are like, well, at the convention, they chose this and this and this. Well, at the convention, the only people who go to the convention are the people who can afford to go to the convention, to travel there, to get the hotel room, to get the ticket price in, which means that there's a narrow focused group of people within the NDP that are making all the rules for people as opposed to the base as a whole. So
very
it's not
big, not to cut you off, I just want to say very big parallels between that and both the state Democratic parties and the National Democratic Party. So I just want to like flag that for the American folks watching.
Yeah, so it's not just Jagmeet that needs to step down, it's the entire upper management of the party. The people who do the vetting and stuff, all of them need to go. And there are people within the NDP who kind of squeaked in and then showed to be a little bit more progressive. So they somehow got through the vetting without letting it reveal too much that they believe that Palestinians are humans. Or that they were more activist based. And so there are a few people in the NDP. So you have Nikki Ashton, Matthew Green, and Leah Gazan, I think would make fantastic leaders for the party. A lot of people will say Charlie Angus, but he's already said that he's retiring. I don't believe he's running. And he had a much more of Jack Layton vibe about him when it comes to popularity. But when it comes to the policies that people want to see, it's Matthew Green, Leah Gazan, Nikki Ashton that really have been fighting for it. And like Matthew Green has gone to support the protesters at the university encampments. You know, he's wearing a keffiyeh on the House floor. Nikki Gazan and Leah Gazan and Nikki Ashton both fight for like universal basic income, you know, better healthcare and rights. Like any one of those three would make a far better leader, but it can't just be the leader. It has to be the upper management of the NDP too, if they ever want to see change. And I think the people want it. Like that's the thing, they want it. They want, you know, don't just talk about building more homes, talk about socialized housing. Like take that extra step. Talk about, you know, doing that thing where the government takes away property. What's it called? Where they usurp
eminent domain.
Yeah, eminent domain. We're in a housing crisis. Eminent domain. There's lots of empty homes that are just being, you know, traded around as investments. Take them. Make them into housing.
I look at New York City because I happen to be looking at real estate there, and I'm amazed in the northeast part of the country how many like old hospital buildings, warehouses, things of that nature have been turned into mixed use, medium to massive density housing in a lot of different places. And you know, they make it work. It's, you know, been retrofitted from the outside in. So like it's a little bit nicer than, you know, a hospital or an abandoned warehouse, right? And like LA's got nothing but abandoned hospitals and warehouses.
Yeah, like it's not just
there's so much potential there, but you need to like you need to get past this sort of like government thing. And I see this in little bits and just a little bit of Canadian politics I've been exposed to, thanks to you, Sandy. And also what I know very well and closely from American politics is there's this Stockholm syndrome of capitalism. This belief that, oh no, but if the government were to take over housing, like the New York housing department, right? Like that would be socialist. We can't do that. Even though Bernie Sanders grew up in like tenement housing, the early like form of New York public housing, which isn't beautiful, but like, you know, it is keeping people off the streets. When you're seeing just today stories of people who work jobs in New York City, they make $50,000 a year, which like when I was starting out my career out of college, like not to date myself, but within this decade, pretty much, like that was a good starting salary. But the fact is, in New York, you can be working 40 hours, 50 hours, making a salary like that, and you gotta live in a homeless shelter or you're on the streets. And that's just insane. You should not, the bare minimum should be whatever it costs, whatever it takes, whether the wage needs to go up, the housing prices need to come down, whether the housing stock needs to increase. I think it's some combination of all these things. But it's not just one of these things. Like some of the liberals that were suggesting that, like, oh, if we just increase the stock of housing, that'll be easier. But it's doing all these things and not being afraid of government intervention and not calling that, you know, communist or Chinese or whatever. By the way, you know who doesn't have a housing crisis? You know who has the opposite of a housing crisis? Like also empty homes that more people need to live in? China, because they do so-called central planning, but it's really government investing. Like I always quote Mariana Mazzucato in America, or I don't know if she's American. I think she's European, but she's framed it as the entrepreneurial state, which is like how I like red pill my conservative or like libertarian friends to be like, okay, don't think of it as central planning. Think of the government as a venture capital firm, and they want something back for what they invest in. And think of it like that. And because their, you know, analogies are so weak, like I've been able to convince the more like college educated stupid people about this stuff. But I think that you don't need to be college educated or like understand these things. If you understand the material conditions of like not being able to afford to make ends meet while you're working every hour of the day and the rest barely sleeping and barely spending time with friends and family, if you see these opportunities where healthcare is expanded, housing is improved, housing is available and affordable, then call it central plan, call it call it Billy Bob Thornton, call it Bloc Québécois, like whatever, like do whatever, people will like it.
Yeah, it's just,
Yes.
it's so frustrating because all they do is talk about building homes, which just, you know, puts money in the pockets of the developers. Like even the deeply affordable homes that he's talking about means subsidies to these developers to help cover that cost. No, we can't wait. Like I said, social murder is still a problem under the liberals. We need more housing faster than what they're promising to build. And if you just simply, you know, renovate a lot of these empty buildings that are already existing and take over a lot of these empty houses that already exist, we could drastically increase the amount of housing that is available. And this could happen within years, not decades.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for inviting Bam and I.
Well, I
on
super
for this
appreciate
coverage.
it. I knew this was going to be a super long day for you guys by coming on to do Canadian analysis of the.
You know how much overtime I got to pay Bam with the tariffs?
Yeah, thank you for having us. I'm always happy to join. You know, I got honorary Canadian status in 2014, so don't play with me.
Oh, really? What's the capital?
Yeah. Real okay, Sandy. I passed every single one. It's Ottawa. My friend from Red Deer, right in between Calgary and Edmonton, gave me my honorary Canadian status a decade ago.
My C word.
Okay, so as for me, I think my next live stream will probably be, I'll be aiming for that Sunday evening again for my news breakdown and everything. Power Report is on right after this. I also have links to all Dan's stuff in the description box below, not to mention this should automatically redirect to the Power Report. I think I've set it up properly. It's my first time doing it. And so
yeah, I think some of your mods may have helped a little bit as well.
Yeah.
I will note that we'll do a little bit. Usually I have like a cold open for Power Report. I'll give like a 2-minute, like, you know, rejiggering break for Bam and I. But yeah, we'll start the show at about 40 after. So if you see some hold music, like stay there, stay put, maybe get up, maybe take a breather after you realize how ridiculous North America is, except for Claudia Scheinbaum. You stay slaying, Queen. But yeah, we will be there soon. And if something doesn't work out, youtube.com/Dan from the internet, youtube.com/LeftoftheBox. Good luck, friend. Good luck.
Yeah. So bye.
Bye.
Peace.
And as I say to all those who are in the sandbox right now, salut, à la prochaine. Thank you for watching and stay tuned. I'm Sandy, wishing your tomorrow is better than your today. And thank you to everyone who's tuned in, to the mods, to the people who give the super chats, to the people who've joined my channel, to everyone for just, caring enough to want to get informed in politics, whether it be Canadian or American, because it's very closely tied together. So everyone tune into the Power Report. This should redirect you over there automatically. And I will see you all soon. Stay safe. Where's my outro? Where is it? There it is. Bye.